Chapter 11:18. At this time, at the mountain gate, He Zhongjing and the others from yesterday were accompanying the old village chief, making him laugh heartily. The old village chief also saw Zhang Feng come out. He hurriedly leaned on his walking stick and hobbled over like a 3-year-old child. Before he got close, he said with a smile, "Yo, you're awake?" This call was very affectionate. Zhang Feng was speechless. He pointed at the door and said, "Old village chief, what's going on? What are all these things?" The smile on the old village chief's face was as bright as the blooming chrysanthemums in the mountain. He hurriedly whispered into Zhang Hong's ear, "Kid, I don't know what you're doing. These people are crazily moving money up the mountain. I saw that this box is full of money. And it's not copper coins, it's gold coins." These people really didn't want to give up. They really wanted to get their hands on the things in his hands. Without even waiting for his consent, he had decided to go all out and burn all the boats. At this time, Lord Qian, Lord He, Lu Hongwen, and Ouyang Kai saw Zhang Feng come out. It was as if they had just seen Zhang Feng. They said in surprise, "Ah, isn't this Prince Zhang? Why don't you rest for a while? After all, you've been tired for the past few days." "Prince Zhang, these are just small gifts from us. I hope you don't mind." How could Zhang Feng sleep at this time? He cupped his fists at them and walked quickly towards them. He also instructed the workers in Tonghui Lane to be gentle when moving things. There were treasures in here. If they bumped into anything, he wouldn't be able to afford to pay for it. When he reached the 5 people, Zhang Feng pretended to be angry and said, "I say, brothers, what is the meaning of this? Moving so many things here so early in the morning, where do you expect me to put my face? Those who don't know might think that I, Zhang Feng, am a petty person who forgets righteousness in the face of profit. Quickly take them back. We can't do this." The eyes of the 5 of them flashed when they saw this, and they hurriedly persuaded earnestly. "Ayaya, brother Zhang Feng, what are you talking about? We should have come here a long time ago. You should be aware that there are many miscellaneous matters in the academy, and we can't leave for a short period of time. Since White Deer Academy is about to open its doors, we don't have anything else, so we could only bring these ordinary things. I hope brother Zhang Feng won't blame us." Zhang Feng saw that they were sincere. Even Ouyang Kai was about to cry and was about to kneel down in front of Zhang Feng. He hurriedly grabbed Ouyang Kai's arm and sighed emotionally. "That's my brother. If it weren't for the fact that there are so many things to take care of, I would have dragged you 5 brothers here today and become sworn brothers. Let's go, let's drink. If there's anything, let's talk inside. Okay." Hearing Zhang Feng's words, the 5 people instantly calmed down. They hurriedly said, Okay, let's go, let's talk inside. There's no rush." As they spoke, the 5 people crowded around Zhang Feng and hurriedly entered Zhang Feng's little wooden hut. This was the first time they had entered Zhang Feng's hut. Once they entered, everything they saw was strange. In addition, Zhang Feng was deliberately showing off. As soon as they entered, he gave out handfuls of cigarettes to the 5 of them as if they were free. Although the 5 of them had seen these cigarettes before and heard of their reputation, this was the first time they had smoked to their heart's content. After all, these things were too expensive. The most important thing was that these things were in Chang'an City. No matter how rich you were, you might not be able to buy them. Although they were coughing non-stop at this moment, they still grinned and exclaimed repeatedly, "Good stuff, this is the real good stuff." Hearing this, Zhang Feng slapped his thigh. "Hey, what kind of good stuff is this? These are all cheap things. You brothers probably haven't drunk the wine I brewed myself. Today, I'll let you brothers have a good eye-opener." While speaking, Zhang Feng smiled mysteriously and quickly closed the door. Then he ran to his bedroom. The 5 people's eyes lit up when they heard this. They hurriedly stared at Zhang Feng. After a while, Zhang Feng looked very distressed as he took out a jar of wine covered with dust. The wine jar was not big. It seemed to be able to hold 2 caddies of wine. They looked at each other, not knowing what Zhang Feng was up to. Zhang Feng took out a few exquisite glass cups from the drawer. The cups were not big, only the size of a walnut. Then he carefully opened the mud seal on the wine jar. In an instant, The strong smell of wine made the 5 people's nostrils twitch uncontrollably. He Zhongjing asked in surprise, "Brother Zhang Feng, what kind of good wine is this? Why haven't we drunk it before?" Zhang Feng smiled as he poured the wine. "This is not something good. This is the white wine I brewed at home when I had nothing to do. I hope the 5 brothers can taste it. I wanted to give some to you brothers, but time is tight and I don't have time to brew it. There is only 1 jar left from the previous stock. When I brew it in the future, I will personally give some to you brothers. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's have a drink first. I can guarantee that you won't be able to drink it anywhere else in the world except here. As long as you can drink it, it must have come from me, Zhang Feng. There's no doubt about it." Chapter 11:19. Seeing how amazing Zhang Feng's description was, they were also interested. Although they were criticizing Zhang Feng for being so stingy in their hearts, they still held the wine cup in their hands as if it was a treasure and tasted it. However, the moment they tasted it, they felt as if there was a flaming knife in their throats, going straight into their stomachs along with their intestines. However, after this spicy feeling, they felt extremely comfortable. Their eyes couldn't help but light up. They didn't care about Zhang Feng anymore and began to drink by themselves. At this time, the Tang's alcohol tolerance was amazing. Everyone was addicted to alcohol, mainly because the alcohol in this era was basically fruit wine or grape wine from the western regions. The alcohol content of the wine was almost negligible, and it was almost the same as fermented glutinous rice. However, when they accidentally drank such spicy white wine, although their faces and ears were red from singing, the 5 of them stared at the small jar of wine on the table with burning eyes after thinking about it. Seeing this, Zhang Feng asked, "How is this wine? Brothers, I didn't say anything wrong, right? Is this good wine?" "Good wine, it's really good wine. It's a rare good wine in the world. Brother Zhang Feng, did you really brew this wine?" When Zhang Feng heard Qian's words, he realized that these people were finally on the right track. He nodded and said, "Yes." However, Zhang Feng immediately asked, "From what you mean, are you suspecting that there's something wrong with this wine? Or rather, where have you drunk this wine before? If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to tell me. If there is, I, Zhang Feng, am willing to give all my skills to you for free. Then, I'll live in seclusion in the mountains and never come out. How about it?" The few of them didn't know that Zhang Feng would be so easily offended. They could only see Zhang Feng's angry expression at this time, and couldn't help but believe it a little more. They repeatedly apologized. Seeing this, Zhang Feng gestured for everyone to continue drinking and ignore him. Then, he inadvertently opened the drawer as if he was looking for something. At this moment, a pair of sunglasses fell to the ground. Zhang Feng saw this and his face changed. He hurriedly sighed and said, "Oh my God!" He hurriedly picked it up and looked at it carefully. Then, he patted his chest and said, "Fortunately, it didn't break." Zhang Feng looked at them from the corner of his eyes. Then, he blew a breath on his sunglasses, wiped it with his sleeve, and put it into his pocket. He pretended to be nonchalant and said, "Where is the formula of the bone-strengthening powder that we talked about? I remember that I put it in this drawer. Why? Can't you find it all of a sudden?" How could they still be thinking about the bone-strengthening powder at this time? He Zhongjing held a wine glass and came to Zhang Feng's side with a smile. He touched Zhang Feng's arm and asked in a low voice, "Brother, just now, the thing on the ground was..." Zhang Feng was not that kind of money grubber. He didn't even look at the boxes outside. But for this thing, his face changed greatly when it fell to the ground. This was obviously an incredible treasure. Before he Zhongjing finished speaking, Zhang Feng's face suddenly changed. "Nothing, nothing, nothing. It's really nothing. This is just a small thing." When he Zhongjing and the others saw this, they all rolled their eyes in disdain. If everyone still felt that this was nothing at this time, then weren't they no different from that idiot? He Zhongjing laughed dryly, then sighed and said, "I even thought that Brother Zhang Feng really regarded us as brothers. But now it seems that we don't have the qualifications to enter Dean Zhang Feng's discerning eyes. If that's the case, then we will leave. See you another day." As he spoke, He Zhongjing and the others looked unhappy and were about to leave. Zhang Feng was anxious when he saw this. He pulled him and hurriedly explained, Ayaya, old brother, why are you like this? AI. Okay. If that's the case, then I will let you see it. Zhang Feng took out the sunglasses from his arms and carefully put it on He Zhongjing's eyes. Then he asked, Brother He, what do you think? At this time, Qian, Ouyang Kai, Lu Hongwen, and the others looked at He Zhongjing eagerly. They almost wanted to snatch it from him. He Zhongjing had never seen this kind of thing. He subconsciously closed his eyes, but after waiting for a moment, he felt that it was nothing and opened his eyes. But when he opened his eyes, he couldn't help but be startled. His surroundings instantly darkened. But when he looked at the door, he found that the color of the scenery outside the door had become softer. It was that kind of dazzling feeling, but that feeling was very comfortable. He Zhongjing said in surprise, Brother Zhang Feng, what is this thing of yours? Why is it so magical? As He Zhongjing spoke, he took off the sunglasses from his eyes. In the Nashi area, he repeatedly experimented with it several times. He couldn't help but have fun. Ouyang Kai and the others gritted their teeth, but they couldn't do anything. When Zhang Feng saw this, he gritted his teeth and sighed. Well, since we are all brothers, I happen to have a few pairs here. I originally planned to give them to the best students in the academy this time. Chapter 11:20. When they heard this, their faces changed. Ouyang Kai held the box of sunglasses sadly and said, How could you give such a good thing to those people? How would they know the value of this thing? How would they know how to cherish it? Zhang Feng laughed and said, Didn't I meet you today? While speaking, Zhang Feng handed an exquisite wooden box to Ouyang Kai. Ouyang Kai wiped his hands on the clothes under his armpits as if he had received a treasure. Then he carefully took the box. Inside the box was a pair of sunglasses that were exactly the same as the one in He Zhongjing's hand. There were 2 black glass pieces in the frame. They looked a little strange, but when He Zhongjing and Lord He put them on just now, everyone felt that it was so magical. Most importantly, it was very beautiful. Ouyang Kai couldn't wait to put on the sunglasses. In an instant, there was a burst of exclamations. After they played for a while, Zhang Feng saw that it was almost time. He waved his hand and said, Brothers, now that I am on the mountain, I can only give you these things. When I am free, I will give you more. How about it? While speaking, Zhang Feng changed the topic and said, I thought about what we discussed yesterday. As I saw a sentence in the unofficial history before, it is better to be alone than to be together. What old Qian said yesterday also benefited me a lot. They asked suspiciously, What sentence? It is that sentence. There are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. Zhang Feng sighed and said, I was a little narrow-minded before. In fact, in terms of age and aptitude, I should respectfully call you elders. Logically speaking, I should have visited you as soon as I opened an academy in Chang'an City. However, I neglected this matter and was impolite. This is a small matter, but I am wrong. I apologize to you here. While speaking, Zhang Feng bowed respectfully to them. They looked at each other and let go of the last bit of grudge in their hearts. Like true brothers, they stepped forward and held Zhang Feng's hand. We're all brothers, why do you have to be like this? Why do you have to do this? Don't say such things that spoil the mood. If you continue, then you're not treating us as real brothers. Zhang Feng could only lower his head and nod desperately. If he continued to listen and make up stories, Zhang Feng was afraid that he would throw up his dinner from last night. However, for the sake of the plan, Zhang Feng suppressed his disgust and pulled Ouyang Kai with one hand and He Zhongjing with the other to sit down. The few of them were already well aware of Zhang Feng's situation. In Chang'an, apart from the Ao Lai Tavern, there was only one other tavern. They didn't know why Li Shimin would secretly come to Zhang Feng every few days. At this time, when they saw that Zhang Feng was so forthright, it was no different from the information they had gathered before. Moreover, this person was not scheming and had many treasures. Not to mention Li Shimin, even they wanted to treasure Zhang Feng. At this time, Zhang Feng pulled on their hands and said, You should all know what happened to me in Chang'an before. Look at my academy. There are so many people supporting it. Although I have made some things, it's hard to support it alone. Although Lao Li and the others are helping, the progress is too slow. For example, the basketball now and the football and so on. If all of them were to be promoted, oh yes, and the bone strengthening powder, you should know about it, right? But look at what the bone strengthening powder looks like in the end. In the end, besides going into the pockets of the residents, what benefits did the people get? They got nothing. Zhang Feng said with righteous indignation, and the others listened and nodded. At this time, Zhang Feng continued, so I have been thinking about how to promote basketball during this time. This is a good thing for the country and the people. These 2 days I met several brothers at the mid-autumn hunt, and this idea came to me. Where can this thing spread the fastest? The academy. In addition, the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Officials, and the Ministry of Rights, 3 top departments of the Tang dynasty. If they can help, think about it, this is a rare opportunity to improve your reputation. If you help, I can guarantee that within a year your official ranks will be promoted, and you will be the real ones. Hearing this, the eyes of the several people instantly turned red. In the current imperial court, it was harder than ascending to the sky to be promoted, and it was a big grade. It was simply a fool's dream. In addition, the emperor was deliberately targeting them at this time. At this time, they were simply unable to move an inch. In addition, each grade of official was divided into upper and lower grades. That was the difference between the 3 grades. Although it was only a difference of 1 word, the difference was huge that night. Only the higher one climbed, the greater the influence in the family, and the more benefits he could get. This was the cruelty of being a big family. They always only valued the family's interests and the contributions you could make to the family. They never cared about who you were. Chapter 11:21. Zhang Feng's words ignited a flame in everyone's hearts. Zhang Feng ignited the flame in everyone's hearts. It was the flame that could start a prairie fire. Zhang Feng saw that the matter was almost settled, so he talked about the basketball. As for the basketball, I won't charge any of you. Just treat it as a free gift. How about we treat it as our gratitude for recognizing our worth? The basketball training method wasn't a secret in the first place. The best way to increase the reputation of White Deer Academy was to promote this method, and these fellows were the best boosters. In addition, each basketball was sold for 100 copper coins. What was this? This was where the profits were. The few of them said that they couldn't accept it. However, no one said a word about whether they would pay or how much they would pay. This was within Zhang Feng's expectations. He didn't say anything and rummaged through the drawer for a while before taking out a small booklet. The booklet was made of white paper and was about the size of a book. When he took out the booklet, the 5 of them couldn't help but twitch their eyelids. Everyone knew the price of white paper. It was 700 copper coins per caddy. This booklet looked like it was about 3 taels. How much was it? This didn't include the things recorded in the middle. Zhang Feng placed the booklet on the table and said, "This is about how to use the basketball and the rules. I've recorded it in detail. Later on, you brothers will have to work hard and make 4 copies. How about that?" The few of them were overjoyed and promised repeatedly. Only then did He Zhongjing from the Ministry of Works happily take the booklet. He held it tightly with both hands in front of his chest. Only then did he stop. Then, everyone knew that the matter had reached the most critical moment. Zhang Feng took out 4 more booklets from the drawer. Now that we've settled the basketball issue, let's treat this radio gymnastics program as a meeting gift for my brothers. After all, my brothers will have a lot of influence after being promoted, and it will be more helpful to us in our future business chain. Chain? No one was surprised as they asked in return. Zhang Feng nodded and said, "That's right. It's a chain store. I'm sure you brothers have visited Chong and Restaurant before. Have you seen the small words below the signboard of Chong and Restaurant? White Deer College's first branch or something like that." The few of them nodded. Zhang Feng then said, "That's what a chain store means. You brothers can arrange for your own stores. You can open them wherever you want. I won't charge you a single copper coin. You can treat it as a free gift. But there's one thing. This braising material and this recipe have been passed down in my family for hundreds of years. It's a secret recipe. Yesterday, it was because of this that I didn't promise you in time. I hope you don't mind. Since this thing has been passed down for hundreds of years and hasn't been passed down, it must be an extremely precious heirloom. Today, Brother Zhang Feng is so generous to pass it down. It must have suffered a great psychological burden. Let's not talk about it anymore. We brothers have already done you 2 favors. You don't need to talk about the braised meat anymore. We all know how much the braised meat is worth. So we will give you 1,000 gold taels as a joining fee for every restaurant. What do you think? 11,000 gold taels? Oh my God! Lao Tzu originally thought that a few thousand strings of coins or a few hundred taels of silver would be enough. He was worried that they would just leave. His brain wasn't sharp enough. How did his vision become so low? Zhang Feng had the urge to slap himself. When they saw this, they couldn't help but look at each other. They didn't know why Zhang Feng had such a pained expression on his face at this moment. They thought that he felt that the money was too little. The few of them looked at each other. And finally He Zhongjing gritted his teeth and said, "I'll make the decision. We'll give you 1,500 taels of silver per restaurant. This is our limit. But don't worry. As long as we can earn money or get the approval of our families, this can only be considered as a deposit. When the time comes, we'll give you extra support. Brother, we'll give you more than this. What do you think?" When Zhang Feng heard this, he finally felt relieved. At the same time, he silently calculated. How much did they earn in this short period of time? How much wealth did these aristocratic families hoard? From the historical records, Li Shimin had to live frugally or cry about being poor everywhere in order to raise money for the military or when there was a disaster. Only then would he be able to raise some money. However, now that he had transmigrated, he truly realized that what Bulsh *T Dubai's nouveau riche was a real nouveau riche. Zhang Feng excitedly held Ouyang Kai and Lu Hongwen's hands. He stuttered for a long time but couldn't say a complete sentence. In the end, he forced out 2 words. Righteous. Chapter 11:22. Since all of you have said so, then the joining fee is settled. From now on, this restaurant will be charged at 1,500 taels of gold. I'm only talking about the joining fee for one restaurant. No matter how many years you stay, I won't charge you a single coin. Hearing this, their eyes lit up. Previously, they thought that 1,500 taels of gold a year was a little too little. They had also inquired about the braised meat. If every shop did not accept food and changed to a cashier, they could earn at least 100 taels of silver a day. This was already considered the least. Under normal circumstances, if they took over the hotel, they would directly renovate it and only open it to the wealthy merchants and officials of the imperial court. Then they would earn more and not less. At this moment, hearing Zhang Feng's words, they really felt that Zhang Feng was really ignorant and inexperienced. They even felt that the money was too little. Ouyang Kai sighed, patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and said, "Good brother, don't worry. We brothers know that you are helping us, so don't worry about this matter. This 1,500 taels of gold is only a deposit. I can guarantee it. At worst, we will write a contract for you later. The 1,500 taels of gold can only be considered as a deposit. When the time comes, we will divide the money into 3 portions, a total of 7,500 taels of gold for the first 2 portions of the year. If you are a brother, you must not refuse, otherwise, we will feel guilty even in our dreams." What else could Zhang Feng say? He didn't think so much at first. How could he have been so muddle-headed as to allow this group of rich people to raise his price to 7,500 taels of silver? Motherf *Cur. He had seen people who gave him money, but this was the first time he saw people rushing to give him money. How could he refuse? Zhang Feng cupped his hands in front of his chest and excitedly bowed to them again. Then he sighed and said, "Well, since the joining fee is settled, let's not talk about it anymore. Let's talk about the next thing." But at this moment, He Zhongjing and Lord, he said, "Brother Zhang Feng, since the joining fee has been settled, can we change the name of the restaurant? After all, this is our restaurant. If we still use the name of Chong and University, isn't it a little bit?" Only then did Zhang Feng understand. He asked, Aren't the names of the shops chosen by my brothers? Since we are all from big families. But for the sake of distinguishing, I have a suggestion. That is, each family can only use the same name. For example, Brother Ouyang, you can use Ouyang Family Hotel. What do you think? But the place of signature must be Chong and Hotel Branch. What do you think? Well, after pondering for a while, they gritted their teeth and said, Brother, since you are so generous, let's make a small request. We will agree. After this matter was settled, Zhang Feng drank 2 glasses of wine with them as a celebration. Then he said, Just now, this kid said that this brazing material is the secret of our Zhang family. Based on this, you should have seen it a few days ago. My fiancé has been following me, so... We know about this. Brother, you don't have to say any more. We understand, we all understand. Brother, how about this? He pondered for a while, then said with a solemn expression. Since this is your secret, we won't force you. You name a price, and as long as it's on time, it will be given to us to provide for our daily consumption. What do you think? They had long been familiar with the business model of Chong and Hotel. Every day, the brazing material of Chong and Hotel was brought down from Shao Mountain. Therefore, although they wanted this recipe very much, they also knew that since Zhang Feng had mentioned his fiancée, it was tantamount to cutting off their thoughts. However, just when they had lost hope, Zhang Feng said, Brothers, since we are doing business openly, I can give you some of the recipes. However, brother, please allow me to take the most important thing. After all, I don't know how many stores I will open as a brother, and I don't know how many stores I will open in a month. If all the materials are sent out through my academy, it will be inappropriate. Then, my academy will directly close down. When they heard this, they looked at each other and laughed. After laughing, Zhang Feng pushed a small booklet on the table and said, In this booklet is the recipe for my brazing ingredients. However, the ingredients for these recipes still need to be found by brothers. I'm only responsible for the most important thing. If you need it, bring the document and directly go to my food factory at the foot of the mountain. Take out the proof and hand in the money you win to receive it. How about it? How about this? I will charge you 10 copper coins for a portion of brazing material. What do you think? Chapter 11:23. 10 copper coins? Everyone couldn't help but be shocked. What was this amount of money to them? Even if it fell to the ground, they wouldn't bother to pick it up. Zhang Feng actually sold this braised food to them for 10 copper coins. What was the difference between that and giving it away? Furthermore, it was a recipe that had been passed down in their family for hundreds of years. Zhang Feng belonged to the Fenghuang Ridge in Yangzhou. Furthermore, they had been to Fenghuang Ridge before and even brought back Zhang Feng's portrait for comparison. When the people there saw Zhang Feng's portrait, they couldn't help but sigh. They all said that the Zhang family actually had descendants. Wait a minute. The tragedy of the Zhang family couldn't be faked. If only a few families said so, they suspected that it was a trap set up by Zhang Feng. However, they had traveled to almost every corner of Phoenix Ridge, from children to teenagers. Even the elderly, who were 70 or 80 years old, could recognize the portrait at first glance. Unless they had lived together for a long time, it was impossible for them to remember it so clearly. However, after experiencing all this, he was actually so generous as to use 10 copper coins to sell this recipe at such a cheap price. What was the difference between this and giving it away for free? They couldn't help but thank Zhang Feng again from the bottom of their hearts. Then, they discussed the details of their cooperation once again. They sat for a full 6 hours. Just as the oil lamps were about to be lit, Ouyang Kai's people left in satisfaction. Looking at their departing backs, Zhang Feng's smiling eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. However, at this moment He Zhongjing, who had already left, hurriedly returned. He looked at Zhang Feng and slapped his forehead, saying, Ayaya, I almost delayed something important. Isn't this the Mid-Autumn Poetry Meet on the 12th? Here is an invitation letter. I hope that Brother Zhang Feng will be magnanimous enough to forgive us. Due to procedural reasons, we forgot about the autumn harvest and only remembered about it now. Without this invitation letter announcing the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Personnel, we would not be able to enter that place. The corner of Zhang Feng's mouth twitched as he silently cursed the old fox. However, his expression was one of pleasant surprise as he received the invitation letter from He Zhongjing's hands. At this moment, He Zhongjing said, "Brother, let's meet again 12 days later at Swallow Descent Restaurant?" Zhang Feng cupped his fists. "All right, let's meet again at Swallow Descent Restaurant 12 days later." 12 days. Since there were only 12 days left? Zhang Feng sighed as he watched them leave. Only then did he open the invitation in his hand. The invitation card detailed the things to take note of at the Mid-Autumn Festival poetry meet and other things. Looking at these things to take note of, Zhang Feng was also secretly preparing in his heart. The things to take note of for this Mid-Autumn Festival poetry meet. If it was poetry, a center could easily come up with it. However, it seemed a little too monotonous. Football was even worse. As for morning exercises, to do it in the middle of the night, the light at night in the Tang dynasty was not good. If he did that, it would simply be a disgrace. After thinking about it, Zhang Feng suddenly realized that he really did not have anything to take out. He could not help but search for some images of him participating in such activities in the future. One by one, they flashed through his mind. Then, according to the current situation, Michael Jackson suddenly froze in Zhang Feng's mind. The father of street dance. If it was Class 1's dance, it would be at Yu Descent Restaurant, a place that specialized in such things. If Zhang Feng only found some girls there, it would only smear Zhang Feng's reputation. In the Tang dynasty, except for the top few singers were all the lowest positions. They were things to please people, and they were the lowest people. As for Jingshu, her attainments in music had already reached the peak. If it were not for the difference between men and women, perhaps at this time, Jingshu could really become a master in music. After Zhang Feng excluded the girls from the dance, Zhang Feng could not help but look at Idiot Wei, who was poking his head out of the door. These guys were obviously people with excessive energy. If they were coached, they should be able to complete some simple movements in 12 days. Street dance movements. The weather was getting colder and colder, and the fog in the mountain was getting thicker and thicker. It was another morning, and Shao Mountain was as mysterious as a fairy mountain hidden in the clouds. At this time, the wake-up bell had been rung 3 times. Usually at this time, the academy would have been overcrowded. The students had already gotten up and were in the courtyard in 2s and 3s, exercising their voices, reciting poems, or practicing the 5 animal frolics. However, since the appearance of morning exercises, all the students were most enthusiastic about basketball. At this time, no one could be seen, but if one went to the basketball court in the sports field, one would definitely see it. However, it was a little strange recently. Perhaps due to the cold weather, only after the bell had rung 3 times for a long time could one faintly see students in 2s and 3s. They shrunk their necks and hurriedly walked to and fro in the academy. Some of them even had rice bowls under their armpits. They shrunk their necks and walked towards the canteen while reading a book. It was obvious that they no longer had the lively feeling from before. This was all caused by the cold weather. Chapter 11:24. The ringing of the bell was to inform everyone that it was time for breakfast and to herald the arrival of a new day. A moment later, the sound of reciting the 4 books and 5 classics could be heard in the square outside the first floor of the teaching building. The sound gradually grew louder and louder as more and more people gathered. Finally, it formed a wave of sound that reverberated throughout the entire Shao Mountain. Because of the sky, the morning exercises were delayed for more than 2 hours. When the sun slowly rose from the horizon, the bell for the morning exercises rang. Only then did the students gather in the center of the campus. At this moment, Zhang Feng slowly yawned, wrapped his robe tightly around him, and crawled out of the room. Looking at the fog outside, Zhang Feng rubbed his sleepy eyes and slowly walked toward the teaching building. When Zhang Feng arrived, the 3 rounds of morning exercises had already ended. At this moment, Qian Wanli led the running team and slowly walked past Zhang Feng. The students hurriedly stood still and saluted Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng chuckled and waved at them. Then, when no one was paying attention, he called out to Chen Chumo and the others. When they saw Zhang Feng acting so sneakily, they thought that something big had happened and hurriedly followed Zhang Feng into the small wooden house. Once they entered the small wooden house, everyone felt a trace of warmth. Once they entered the small wooden house, Chun Chumo and the others returned to their natural instincts. They were either lying down or sitting on chairs, minding their own business as they searched for prey or wanted to discover some miracle from Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng glanced at everyone, then stared at Li Chengqian and said, "There are still 11 days until the mid-autumn poetry meet, right?" Li Chengqian didn't know what Zhang Feng wanted to say, but he still nodded. Yes, there are still 11 days. Therefore, during this period of time, we will also be diligently practicing basketball, football, and morning exercises. When the time comes, I believe that with these 3 things, the fame of White Deer College will definitely spread throughout the world. Is there even a need to say that? With the few of us taking action, it will be hard for us not to become famous. When I think about those little girls in Swallow Descent restaurant. No, those girls' screams. I'm really excited. Seeing Chang Chumo's wretched smile, Zhang Feng was speechless and scolded. Get lost? Can't you think of something else? Women, women, women all day. Sooner or later, you will die on a woman's belly. Chen Chumo just smiled and didn't answer. Zhang Feng was so angry that he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He waved his hand and said, "Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. I have a plan here. You can think about it and see if it works." The importance of the Mid-Autumn Poetry Meet to White Deer Academy was obvious to everyone. At this moment, Chang Chumo had also retracted the mischievous smile on his face and sat obediently on a stool at the side. He crossed his legs and swung them with all his might. This made Li Chengqian want to rush up and beat him up, but Zhang Feng suddenly spoke. "You all spend all day at Swallow Descent restaurant. Do you all know how to dance?" Li Chengqian and the others' expressions instantly froze. We know a little." But Li Chengqian seemed to have thought of something and asked hesitantly, "Fengzi, what do you mean? I don't know what you are thinking all day. Could it be that you want to go to Swallow Descent restaurant? Basically, we all know a little about the things in Swallow Descent restaurant. Why are you asking this?" Li Chengqian had a bad premonition. Zhang Feng became spirited. He looked at Li Chengqian and asked, "Tell me, what do you all know? Is it a horse-riding dance or something? No, tell me, what kind of dance do you all know? Tell me, maybe we will know when the time comes." Hearing this, Li Chengqian and the others' expressions suddenly changed. "Dance? I am the crown prince and you want me to dance? And a man at that? If this was really done, and it was spread back to the palace, someone would die." Li Chengqian didn't know what Zhang Feng meant, but since he had said this, he followed Zhang Feng's train of thought. But no matter how he thought about it, he still felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. He couldn't imagine what kind of terrifying disaster it would be if those coquettish songs changed their faces to his own people. Although the palace seemed calm, it was still turbulent. Everyone's eyes were on him. Because he was the crown prince, if he did anything wrong, he would be bombarded by everyone. At this moment, this brat Zhang Feng wanted him to dance. Even if he died, he couldn't lose face. However, Li Chengqian wanted to know the meaning of this. After a fierce struggle in his heart, Li Chengqian said, "Yes." After struggling for a long time, he reluctantly said, "Tell me, what is the difference between this dance you speak of and the dances performed by those singers? If it is the kind of dance performed by singers, then if any man performs that kind of dance in public, he will be chased out of the family, a scandal that will be laughed at for the rest of his life." Zhang Feng also knew what Li Chengqian meant, but he also had the impulse to slap him. His mouth was too fast. Damn it. He didn't think that there would be such an awkward silence. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "As brothers, how can I let you do such a thing? The dance I speak of is not the same as theirs. Let me ask you, do you want to learn it? Do you want to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat? Just now it was just a joke. A joke is a joke. Just treat it as a joke." Chapter 11:25. Li Chengqian was speechless. He was almost scared to death by Zhang Feng. This kid actually said that it was just a joke? Li Chengqian became especially cautious. After thinking for a long time, he stared at Zhang Feng for a long time before saying, "Fengzi, You should know the significance of this mid-autumn poetry meet. We sincerely want to establish White Deer College. If a woman can't become a great scholar because of this, my brothers will feel uneasy for the rest of their lives. He didn't know what was wrong with Zhang Feng today. He thought that Zhang Feng was testing him. But how was Zhang Feng testing him? Zhang Feng immediately interrupted Li Chengxian's cliché and said, I didn't expect you to be so unyielding in the past. Alright, since that's the case, I'll teach you this dance. But don't worry, the dance I'm talking about is different from the dances you know of. It's more powerful and domineering. It shows the might and majesty of a man. I can guarantee that as long as you dance like this in Yanlai restaurant, not to mention Chang'an City, even the Tang dynasty won't be able to hold your reputation. No matter where you go, you won't lack girls. I, Zhang Feng, can guarantee it with my head. Chang Chumo's eyes turned red when he heard the word girls. He jumped up from the stool and walked quickly to Zhang Feng. He stared at Zhang Feng with a burning gaze and asked, Is what you said true? At the same time, a morning class was going on in the military camp. The morning class was actually very simple. They followed the military training method and tossed and turned on the horizontal bar, the parallel bar, and the wooden horse. Then they had to climb over the net, rope, and obstacle course. However, just as everything was going smoothly, there was a sudden commotion. A moment later, a military officer suddenly appeared in front of Yu Qigong's tent. He hurriedly woke Yu Qigong up. Yu Qigong wanted to slap the person away, but the person seemed to be prepared. When Yu Qigong's palm came, the person quickly dodged and said, General, something bad has happened. Niu Jianhu is in trouble. At this moment, Yu Qigong, who was a little sleepy, heard the words Niu Jianhu, and his drowsiness instantly disappeared. He hurriedly opened his eyes wide and asked, What happened? Niu Jianhu's training was going smoothly today, but I don't know what happened to him. He suddenly broke his leg, the commandant said in a frightened voice. Buzz! Yu Qigong felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He grabbed the collar of the commandant's armor and asked murderously, What did you say? The military officer was already trembling in fear from Yu Qigong's murderous aura. However, he gritted his teeth and hurriedly said, Niu Jianhu broke his leg this morning. He fell down when he was climbing over the net and broke his leg. His leg is broken. With a bang, Yu Qigong could no longer hold on to the commandant. He loosened his grip and the commandant fell to the ground. Then he hurriedly scrambled out of the tent. Yu Qigong was no longer in the mood to sleep. He sat on the chair in a daze for a moment and murmured, How is that possible? That kid broke his leg? Yu Qigong suddenly thought of something and his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly shouted, Men, hurry up and bring that kid Niu Jianhu here. Niu Jianhu was his good brother's only son. He was like the apple of his eye. Now that something had happened to him in his camp, then he really didn't know how to explain it to Niu Jinda. If it had been anything else, he could have just recuperated. However, a broken leg and a broken arm meant that he would have to live with crutches for the rest of his life. If he wanted to join the army, it would be impossible. After a while, the doctor in the army carried the pale Niu Jianhu into the tent. When Yu Qigong saw Niu Jianhu's face, his heart suddenly changed. He grabbed the doctor and asked, What the hell is going on? What happened to Niu Jianhu's leg? How could Lang Zhong not know the relationship between Yu Qigong and Niu Jinda? How could he not know whose son Niu Jianhu was? Although he was afraid at this time, he still said with a bitter face, replying to the general Niu Jianhu, he may not be able to keep his leg. After receiving another confirmation, Yu Qigong's face instantly turned pale. This old brother of his had been on the battlefield all his life and only had Niu Jianhu as his precious treasure. In this era, breaking a leg, especially for someone who was born in the military, was tantamount to a death sentence. For the incomparably arrogant Niu Jinda, it was simply a disaster. Moreover, Niu Jianhu had only one son in the Niu family. At this time, Niu Jianhu had not yet married and had children. He had not yet left a seed for the Niu family. If such a thing happened at this time, who would be willing to marry him? Yu Qigong's chaotic thoughts flashed through his mind, and then he hurriedly asked, Lao Tzu asks you, can Niu Jianhu's leg be saved? Chapter 11:26. In an instant, Gong's face was filled with sorrow. The lieutenant wanted to comfort him, but when he saw his bloodshot eyes, he retreated. At this moment, Niu Jianhu was casually holding back his tears and pain. He grinned and said, "Uncle Yuqi, this is a small matter. It's fine. Don't shut the F***ck up, Lao Tzu." Gong roared angrily and slumped on the stool like a deflated balloon. He stared at Niu Jianhu, who was lying on the soft couch, and his leg, which was dangling at the side without any feeling. His face was extremely pale. He didn't know how to face his old friend. A living person had been placed in his hands, but if old Niu returned from Lantian and wanted to see the results of his son's training, what should he say? Should he just pat old Niu on the shoulder and say that his son was dispirited? Or, after letting his imagination run wild, Gong rubbed his face hard and asked the physician weakly, "Let me ask you, is there still hope?" Silence. Dead silence. At this moment, no one dared to speak because no one knew if Niu Jianhu's leg could be saved. The result was obvious, but no one dared to say it. At that time, everyone had seen it with their own eyes. When Niu Jianhu was climbing over the net rope wall, his ankle was caught by the net rope. Just as he was about to climb over the railing, everyone heard a cracking sound. Then, they saw a bone sticking out of Niu Jianhu's leg. If it could be reattached, then it would be a miracle. With a bitter expression, the military doctor lifted Niu Jianhu's armor skirt and removed his boots. At this moment, Gong discovered that the gap between the skirt and the armor had long been dyed red with blood. Even the underwear was stuck to the blood. A section of shining white bone shards dazzled Gong's eyes, causing him to feel pain. At this moment, Gong was in despair. If there was still hope, it would only be saved by a god. When he thought of that, Gong suddenly thought of someone. That's right, he thought of Zhang Feng. However, when Gong stood up and was about to walk out excitedly, he was stunned when he reached the entrance of the tent. After a deep sigh, he returned to the tent. Just now, the military doctor's action of tearing his trousers seemed to have affected his wound. At this moment, Niu Jianhu's face was pale and he had fainted. Because of the operation just now, the blood on Niu Jianhu's leg was gushing out even more violently. The military doctor had a panicked expression as he hurriedly ordered a few people to pick up some quicklime and other things that the military used to stop bleeding. Niu Jianhu's bleeding seemed to be making a final struggle. Seeing this, Gong could no longer sit still. He tore off his armor and rushed out of the camp. The army camp was not far from White Deer Plains. However, when Gong left the military camp and looked in the direction of White Deer College, he was slightly stunned. He didn't know what to say. What if even Zhang Feng and Dr. Sun couldn't do anything? At this moment, Zhang Feng and Dr. Sun were Gong's last hope. If these two people couldn't do anything, then who else in the world could save Niu Jianhu? If he didn't save Niu Jianhu would definitely use up his last bit of life force in less than 3 days. Then, thinking of this, Gong didn't hesitate anymore. He fiercely kicked the warhorse beneath him. The warhorse neighed in pain and madly galloped in the direction of White Deer College. At this moment, everything on the mountain was proceeding in an orderly manner. Those who were studying, and those who were doing other things were doing other things. It was rare for Zhang Feng to have some free time. He basked in the warmth of the sun and instructed Chang Chumo and the others in their clumsy street dance moves. He would stand up from time to time and teach them. However, because Chang Chumo and the others were too stupid, and because they were acting like young girls, they became shy. Zhang Feng was so angry that he simply brought the others along. At this moment, Zhang Feng faintly heard the sound of hurried horse hooves. His heart trembled and he was surprised. He thought that it was Ouyang Kai and the others returning. However, in the blink of an eye he saw the answer. He saw Gong appear at the entrance of the college with a pale face. Zhang Feng was shocked when he saw this. Old Yu's condition wasn't right this time. Every time he saw Gong, he was always in a good mood. He had never seen him like this before. The people around him also saw the expression on Gong's face, and they were all shocked. Zhang Feng hurriedly instructed everyone to continue practicing, and then hurriedly caught up. Yu Qigong looked at Zhang Feng and then at Li Chengqian and the others. He sighed and said in a muffled voice, "Let's talk inside." Then he plunged into Zhang Feng's small wooden house without looking back. When he entered, Zhang Feng wanted to say something. However, with his sharp senses, he actually noticed that there were a few drops of blood on Yu Qigong's face. Although the blood had already coagulated, when combined with Yu Qigong's current complexion, Zhang Feng couldn't help but be shocked. He hurriedly asked, "Old Yu, what happened?" Yu Qigong looked at Zhang Feng. He wanted to say something but stopped. After looking at him for more than 10 breaths, he sighed heavily. His mouth opened for a long time before he finally squeezed out a few words. "I'm fine, but I'm afraid Xiaohu won't live for long." Chapter 11:27. Hearing this, Zhang Feng's face suddenly changed. He asked, "What happened? Wasn't he training at the foot of the mountain? How did this happen? Tell me what exactly happened." Yu Qigong didn't know how to tell Zhang Feng at this time, and he didn't know if it would be useful. He opened his mouth and finally said, "Everything was fine, but I don't know what happened today. I heard that when Xiaonyo was training, he seemed to be climbing the god's net wall or something. One of his legs got stuck on it, and in the end, it broke." Hearing this, Zhang Feng was shocked and hurriedly asked again, "Who did you hear this from? I saw it with my own eyes." Yu Qigong seemed to use the last of his strength to say this. His lowered eyes flashed with tears, as if he was thinking of Niu Jinda, who had gone through fire and water with him. He could understand the scene after seeing his son's miserable state. Zhang Feng was anxious. He grabbed Yu Qigong's shoulder and shook him hard. However, Yu Qigong was like an iron tower. No matter how hard Zhang Feng shook him, he didn't move an inch. Zhang Feng was so angry that he pounded on his chest and shouted, "Tell me, what happened to him? Even if his leg was broken, how broken is his leg? If it's just a little bit, I can fix it right now." "Fix it? Haha." Yu Qigong laughed bitterly and said, "Even the bone stubble is out. Even if there are elixirs or gods, I'm afraid there's no way to fix it." Yu Qigong looked at Zhang Feng unwillingly, but suddenly a glimmer of hope burst out from his desperate eyes. He asked, "Fengzi, you just said you have a way? Do you have a way? You know Xiaonyo's situation. He's the only child in his life. What if? Do you have a way? I owe you my life. How about it?" Seeing that Zhang Feng didn't say anything, Yu Qigong's eyes reddened. "Take it that I, old you, am begging you. Tell me you have the most ideas. Help me think of a solution. I really don't have the face to face old Niu." "What are you talking about? Of course I have a way. If nothing goes wrong, not only will Xiaohu not die, he will be a good man again in 2 months. Do you believe me?" Yu Qigong was slightly taken aback when he heard this. A glimmer of hope flashed through his eyes as he looked at Zhang Feng, but he immediately laughed bitterly and shook his head. When Zhang Feng saw that Yu Qigong did not believe him, he hurriedly rummaged through the first aid kit in the house. At the same time, he went into the bedroom and took out the last half jar of alcohol from under the bed. This was the last half jar, but at this time, in order to set Niu Xiaohu's bones, Zhang Feng did not care much and took it all out. Seeing Zhang Feng like this, Yu Qigong was slightly taken aback. A look of surprise flashed through his eyes as he asked, "Fengzi, can you really save him?" Zhang Feng glared at Yu Qigong. "Get out of the way. When have I ever lied to you? If I say he won't die, he won't die. Get out of the way. Don't block me from saving him." After hearing this, Yu Qigong ran behind Zhang Feng with a whoosh and looked at Zhang Feng without blinking. Zhang Feng went out and saw that Yu Qigong was still like this. He sighed and hurried to the mountain gate. As he ran, he shouted, "Quickly go and get Dr. Sunday. Ask him to come down the mountain with me immediately." Although Zhang Feng did not know the situation at this time, if it was just a broken leg, Zhang Feng was really confident that he could set it back. However, he still needed a person, and that was Sun Simiao. After all, he was not a serious medical student. He could still perform surgery, but he had to see how serious the injury was first before he could make a decision. Moreover, if Sun Simiao followed him, his reputation as a miracle doctor was not just for show. At least, he still had to rely on Sun Simiao to seal the blood vessels and so on. How could he, a dabbler, know these things? Seeing Zhang Feng running down the mountain in a hurry, Yu Qigong came back to his senses. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and glared at Li Chengqian, who was stunned in place. Li Chengqian only came to his senses at this time and hurried to the small bamboo house where Sun Simiao lived. Originally, Cheng Chumo and the others wanted to go down the mountain to see who was and what happened. However, when they saw Yu Qigong's expression, they retreated in fear and continued to practice and dance. Yu Qigong quickly followed Zhang Feng. Although he was worried about this matter, he was more worried that this brat would charge into the military camp head-on. If that happened, he would not even know how he would die. As for Sun Simiao, he naturally knew the pros and cons of this matter and knew where to find him, so he did not need to worry too much. Yu Qigong rode his horse and caught up with Zhang Feng, who was sitting on a pole. He reached out his hand and gestured for Zhang Feng to get on the horse. However, Zhang Feng glared back, but he also knew that this was the time to save people, so he could not care less. Yu Qigong practically lifted him onto the horse's back, and then he heard Yu Qigong say, "Hold on tight." In the next moment, Zhang Feng truly felt the effects of a 100-meter catapult jump. Chapter 11:28. Shao Mountain was about an hour away from the barracks. However, due to his eagerness to save Niu Xiaohu, coupled with Yu Qigong's valiant horsemanship, his unusually cold expression, and the fact that Zhang Feng was sitting behind the horse, the crowd from afar consciously opened up a path for them. Soon, the two of them arrived at the barracks. Zhang Feng entered the barracks under Yu Qigong's roar and saw the dying Niu Xiaohu. At this moment, Niu Xiaohu's face was as pale as paper. This was obviously a sign of excessive blood loss. Zhang Feng looked at Niu Jianhu speechlessly. Then, he looked at the doctor who was using quicklime to stop Niu Jianhu's bleeding. He asked, "Is there anything to replenish blood here?" From the perspective of traditional Chinese medicine, he was a military doctor. Even Yu Qigong had to treat him politely in the army. When he saw a young man approaching, he wanted to scold him. But when he saw that it was Yu Qigong standing beside him, he answered honestly, "Yes, there is." Without waiting for Zhang Feng to speak, Yu Qigong roared, "Since there is, why don't you go and prepare it?" What could the doctor say? He hurriedly ordered 2 of his disciples to prepare the herbs to replenish the blood. The doctor felt a little strange. Why was General Yu Qi so polite in front of this young man? However, he also knew that this was not the time to ask. He could not ask. If he angered this fiend, it would be a different matter whether he could leave this place alive today. After Zhang Feng asked the doctor to leave, he took out alcohol from the first aid kit and a disinfectant bowl. He poured some alcohol into the bowl and soaked the dagger that Shiva had given him in it. Then he took out a pair of scissors and asked for a lighter. With a bang, he lit the alcohol and carefully baked the scissors in the alcohol. Only then did he carefully cut all the cloth on Niu Jianhu's broken leg. Even though Zhang Feng was already mentally prepared, he still could not help but feel nauseous when he saw Niu Jianhu's miserable state. He could not help but feel nauseous. His face turned pale. At least 3 centimeters of the bone stubble was exposed. The fracture was still fine. There were no fragments or mud. However, the blood on the wound had already soaked the bed and soft mattress under Niu Jianhu's body. The blood had already flowed down the soft mattress and into the yellow soil on the ground. At this moment, the soft mattress had become muddy. The tent was filled with a pungent smell of blood. Zhang Feng could not care less. He knelt in the pool of blood as if he was making an extremely exquisite piece of art. He used a pair of small scissors that no one had ever seen before to slowly clean the leg hair and dried blood scabs on Niu Jianhu's leg. His other hand held an iron clamp with a ball of cotton. From time to time, he would dip the cotton into the bowl filled with the smell of alcohol and wipe it. This continued for a very long time. It was only when all the dirt on Niu Jianhu's right leg had been cleaned that Zhang Feng noticed his wound. Lu Jianhu's wound was obviously caused by a rapid fracture when he leaned back. This kind of wound was very difficult to treat and required surgery. On the way here, Zhang Feng had thought a lot. If the bone was broken but did not pierce through the flesh, then it would be fine. He only needed to make a plaster splint and lie down for 2 months to recover. However, at this moment, this was a little uncertain. After all, just as he had thought earlier, he was not a serious doctor. He was only a dabbler and only knew a little about physiology. At this moment, he could not care about anything else. After all, Niu Jinhu's leg was still bleeding. This was the most fatal point. If the blood loss was serious, even if his leg was reconnected, this kid would not be able to keep his life. At this moment, Li Chengxian hurried into the tent with Sun Simiao. As soon as they entered, Sun Simiao hurriedly put down the medicine box in his hand and squatted beside Zhang Feng. He looked at Niu Jinhu's leg and then looked at Zhang Feng. He asked, "Do you think he can still be saved?" Zhang Feng nodded heavily. "I'm going to reconnect his bones." As soon as these words came out, everyone present was greatly shocked. Reconnect bones. This kid actually said that he was going to reconnect Commandant Niu's bones? They had only heard of Guan Yunchang, the divine Dr. Bianc, who had scraped his bones to treat his injuries. However, they had never heard of anyone who could connect bones in such a manner. Everyone knew that if one wanted to connect bones, one would have to cut open the flesh. Sun Simiao opened his mouth to ask, but in the end, he did not ask anything. He only asked, "Are you confident?" How confident was he? Zhang Feng did not answer Sun Simiao's question. Instead, he asked, "Can you help him stop the bleeding? If it continues to flow like this, even if his leg is reconnected, he may very well die from excessive blood loss." Sun Simiao pondered for a moment. He seemed to recall the book that Zhang Feng had given him. There was indeed such a record in it. He did not waste any time. Imitating Zhang Feng, he took out a large handful of silver needles and stuffed them into Zhang Feng's bowl of alcohol that was still emitting flames. He skillfully inserted needles all over Niu Jinhu's body. After a moment, a perfectly fine person's body exploded like a hedgehog. Niu Jinhu also seemed to be in pain. Although he was unconscious, he still let out painful groans. Chapter 11:29. When the last of the 99 silver needles entered Niu Jinhu's body, the wound on his right leg stopped bleeding. However, the moment the blood stopped flowing, Niu Jinhu's calf swelled up. Zhang Feng frowned slightly. As long as the wound didn't bleed, it would swell up a little. It was better than dying from blood loss. Using alcohol to clean Niu Jinhu's wound was troublesome. Alcohol was irritating to begin with. If Niu Jinhu woke up from the pain, he would be in big trouble if he couldn't hold on. After thinking about it, Zhang Feng decided to use a small cotton ball to clean up the wound bit by bit. It took more than 2 hours. After cleaning up, Zhang Feng took the gauze soaked in alcohol and roughly bandaged the wound to prevent it from getting infected. After that, Zhang Feng drove everyone out of the tent. He took Yu Qigong and Sun Simiao to the entrance of the military camp and squatted in a corner. Zhang Feng thought about something as he smoked. Sun Simiao couldn't figure out what Zhang Feng wanted to do. He hurriedly asked, "Kid, why are you squatting here?" Zhang Feng didn't say anything. He just thought about something quietly. Sun Simiao didn't want to disturb Zhang Feng, so he just sat there with him. After a while, Zhang Feng threw away the cigarette in his hand and asked, "Old Niu, do you have any lambs or calves in the military camp?" Zhang Feng didn't know how old you got into the military camp. Yu Qigong nodded seriously and asked doubtfully, "We have cows and lambs, even calves and mules. What do you need them for?" Although he wanted to ask when Zhang Feng would start saving people, he didn't dare to ask. Zhang Feng was too lazy to explain. He just waved his hand and hurried him to prepare. "You'll find out later. You just need to find me a sheep. It's best if it has a broken leg recently." Yu Qigong seemed to have understood something. There weren't any broken legs in the army, but there would be soon. Only after Yu Qigong left did Sun Simiao come to a realization. "Don't tell me this is the first time you've done it?" Zhang Feng nodded speechlessly. "You've seen it for yourself. Although I know a lot, I only know a little about a lot of things. Especially when it comes to military medicine, I still have to rely on you to operate it. Although I can talk a little, I really can't do it if I really have to do it." Sun Simiao was a little speechless. Was this kid really treating people like a dead horse? But at this moment, he also knew that even if he came, there was nothing he could do about Niu Jinhu's leg injury. Since this kid said so, he should have a certain degree of confidence. After all, this kid never did things that he was not sure of. Moreover, he had a very good relationship with Niu Jinda. If Niu Jinhu died in his hands, then this kid would probably live in guilt for the rest of his life. After a while, Yu Qigong found 2 young soldiers to carry a mule with a broken leg. He came forward and asked, "Feng Zi, do you think this will work?" Zhang Feng looked at the mule that was tied up and then looked at the mule's leg. How could he not understand that this kid had just broken the leg? However, this was not the time to blame Yu Qigong. Moreover, the Tang dynasty had always been tough. If a mule could be exchanged for a person's life, then there probably wouldn't be a mule or even a donkey in the Tang dynasty. After everything was ready, Zhang Feng tore off a few threads that were thinner than hair from the gauze. However, after tugging, he couldn't be stubborn. Zhang Feng instantly became distressed. He was so anxious that he scratched his head. However, in the next moment, Zhao Feng saw that Yu Qigong's hair couldn't be washed. He couldn't help but have an idea. "Old Yu, what? Can I see a few strands of your hair?" Yu Qigong didn't know what this kid was up to, but he still pulled off a small handful of hair from his head and handed it to Zhang Feng. He opened his mouth and wanted to ask something, but he sighed heavily and quickly left without looking back. After he left, Zhang Feng found himself in a difficult situation. He originally wanted the 2 soldiers to move the mule to another place, but now it was just him and Sun Simiao. They had to drag the mule with a broken leg to a secluded place. Using the same method, they shaved off all the hair on the mule's leg and disinfected it with alcohol. However, the mule was tossed around until it cried out a few times. Before it could do anything, a young soldier punched the mule in the face. The mule fainted from the pain once again. The young soldier chuckled and signaled Zhang Feng to continue. However, Sun Simiao was also staring at Zhang Feng. Seeing Zhang Feng like this, he couldn't help but be shocked and asked, "What are you doing?" Chapter 1130. Zhang Feng didn't say anything. He soaked an embroidery needle in the water and stirred it 3 times over the fire. Then, he put on a strand of hair and got to work. First, he slowly sewed up the torn flesh. After a while, Zhang Feng took out the dagger that was soaked in alcohol for a long time and was studded with gems. He gently separated the flesh from the mule's leg in a straight line, revealing the deep white bone inside. He cleaned up the residue on the bone, then pulled the flesh apart and carefully joined the bone back together. This was a physical task. Even though it was such a simple action, it still took about half an hour. By the time he finished sewing up the wound, he had already wasted 2 hours. Sun Simiao looked thoughtfully at Zhang Feng as he finished sewing up the last thread. At this moment, he suddenly realized, "Are you going to use this method? Are you going to reconnect that brat's leg?" Zhang Feng wiped the sweat off his forehead and panted, "It's not me, it's you." At Taiji Palace, Li Shimin had just finished his morning court session and hurried to the imperial study. The moment he entered the imperial study, he saw a young general kneeling in the middle of the hall. Li Shimin asked the moment he entered the imperial study, "What's going on? Did something happen in the military camp?" When the young general heard this, he hurriedly rushed over and kowtowed twice. Only then did he tell Li Shimin about the injury of the ox's leg. When Li Shimin heard this, his expression suddenly changed. His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette and walked around the imperial study twice. However, he seemed to have thought of something. He hurriedly asked, "Did anyone go to find Sun Simiao? Also, what did great Dr. Sun say?" Although he already knew the consequences of a broken leg, he still asked with hope. "Your Majesty, the general has personally gone up the mountain to find great Dr. Sunday. Great Dr. Sun should have already gone to the military camp." Li Shimin was slightly comforted when he heard this. However, the young general continued, "However, I heard that the general didn't go up the mountain to find great Dr. Sunday. He seemed to have gone to find the dean of White Deer College." "Huh?" Li Shimin was stunned. "Find this brat? Why did he look for him? She was not a doctor." But suddenly, you seemed to think of Zhang Feng. Previously, he had kept a jar of something called alcohol like a treasure, and he had also heard this kid bragging about medicine and so on. At this moment, a thought flashed through his mind, but he didn't know if this kid could save Niu Jianhu's leg. After all, this was an ancient and unchanging truth that everyone knew. Broken legs were basically one of the top 10 terminal diseases. Once a leg was broken, it was very likely that the person would become a cripple. If he used crutches, he could still walk 2 steps. However, the news that Li Shimin received was indeed that Niu Jianhu's bones were already exposed. How could it be reattached? Even if Hua Tuo was still alive, he probably wouldn't be able to do anything. In the end, Li Shimin placed his hopes on Zhang Feng, who had been creating miracles for him. After thinking for a while, Li Shimin waved his hand and said, "Quickly send a message to the Imperial Physician Institute. Tell them to go to the barracks immediately. Whoever can help Niu Jianhu connect his bones will be rewarded with 10,000 taels of silver." On the other side, on an official road not far from Shao Mountain, Niu Jinda led his men and rushed unhurriedly in the direction of Chang. The mysterious person who had sneaked into Lantian County had been surrounded by him, Li Shaogong, and the others in the depths of Erpai Gully, in the newly dug mine. However, just as Yu Qigong was about to go forward and conduct the final search, he suddenly received an order from the emperor to temporarily stop the capture. Seeing the mysterious person, who was about to be caught, escape right under his nose, Niu Jinda was so angry that he broke the mo knife in his hand with a punch. He sighed and left angrily. He wasn't angry at the emperor's secret order. It was because no one had caught the mysterious person, and the person had actually escaped right under his nose. This was a disgrace to him, but he couldn't do anything about the emperor's order. At this time, when he thought of the mysterious person, Niu Jinda was itching with hatred. If he were to find out who the mysterious person was in the future, he would definitely take revenge. Then he would definitely take revenge 10 times over. Thinking to this point, Niu Jinda couldn't help but take out the Mitsubishi military knife and wave it around in his hand. Then he laughed and hid it in his bosom again like a treasure. Although he didn't get the person this time. But to be able to get the 203 rhombus bayonets from Zhang Feng, this was the biggest gain for Niu Jinda. At this time, the sound of hurried horse hooves on the official road made Niu Jinda and the others quickly alert. Everyone gave way to the main road and stood on the side without moving. After waiting quietly for a moment, a jujube red horse hurriedly stopped beside Niu Jinda. Niu Jinda couldn't be more familiar with the general on the jujube red horse and the insignia on his military uniform. At this time, Niu Jinda's eyes slightly narrowed. That little soldier didn't hesitate and dismounted to salute. After he finished, he said, "General Niu, this little one is under the order of General Yuchi to ask General Niu to quickly return to the camp." Hearing this, Niu Jinda frowned slightly and said, "Did something happen in the army? If it wasn't something that even Yu Qigong couldn't handle, why would Yu Qigong be in such a hurry to ask him to return?" Hearing this, that person instantly didn't know what to say. He didn't know if he would still be alive after saying that his son's leg was broken. But after weighing the pros and cons, he still gritted his teeth and hurriedly said, "Niu Jianhu Yudue encountered an accident during training and broke his right leg." When Niu Jinda heard this, he was instantly stunned. His subordinates' faces also changed greatly at this time. Instantly drawing the long knife at his waist, that little soldier thought to himself that, as expected, he smiled bitterly and waited for the judgment of fate. At this time, when Niu Jinda heard that his son's leg was broken, his entire person was in a state of confusion. Although the word impossible kept flashing in his mind, the other voice of his son's leg being broken kept ringing in his ears. After a moment, Lu Juanda angrily roared, "Jia!" Chapter 1131. With his angry roar, the horse he was sitting on instantly felt the pain. Like an arrow leaving the bow, it quickly galloped in the direction of Shao Mountain. Niu Jianhu was his only son, his only precious son. He was already 46 years old this year, and because of years of war and some other factors, he was only pregnant with Niu Jianhu at the age of 37. Niu Jinda was so excited that he didn't close his eyes for 3 days and 3 nights. He told everyone he met that he had a son, he had a son. Thinking of the excitement at that time, Niu Jinda couldn't help but cry. It was as if the scenes of the past had just happened yesterday. Impossible. My son was born smart. How could such a disaster happen to him? I've been honest all my life. I've never done anything heartless. Impossible, impossible. Why? Why is it my son Jianhu? Why not someone else? Niu Jinda roared again and again as he ran madly to the military camp. At this time, the news that Niu Jianhu had broken his leg was quietly spreading in Chang'an City. After Cheng Chumo and the others finished today's dance training and all the other training, they hurriedly stayed at the academy during the meal break. Only then did they learn of this matter. After learning of this matter, they were stunned for a long time. Then they rushed to the military camp without delay. It was hard for them to imagine how Niu Jianhu had survived. They originally thought that someone in the military had an accident and even made fun of that person for being a coward and needing Fengzi to deal with this kind of thing. However, this person was their brother, so they couldn't sit still anymore. When they arrived at the military camp, except for the commander-in-chief, even Yu Qigong could only squat outside the camp and smoke. The people around him didn't even dare to breathe. Li Chengxian took the lead and jumped off the horse. He hurried to Yu Qigong and asked, "Uncle Yu Qi, Jianhu, did something really happen to him?" Yu Qigong's bloodshot eyes looked at Li Chengxian, and only then did he let out a snort as a response. "You've got a definite answer." Li Chengxian and the others couldn't stay calm in an instant. "Really, it's all true. How is this possible?" "It was true. Wasn't this kid still alive and kicking a while ago? Didn't we sneak down the mountain and go to Swallow Descent restaurant together? Why is it suddenly gone? Oh my God! What is going on here?" He really couldn't imagine it. He hurriedly pulled the deputy general next to Yu Qigong to the side and asked, "Let me ask you, what is going on?" The deputy general naturally knew Li Chengxian. After he explained everything in detail, Li Chengxian couldn't help but be speechless. He didn't know what to say. He could only sigh heavily. After weighing the pros and cons, Li Chengxian gritted his teeth and decided to go in and take a look. Yu Qigong had wanted to stop him, but he sighed and ignored him. Cheng Chumo and the others hurriedly followed Li Chengxian into the tent. In the tent, Zhang Feng and Sun Simiao were observing Niu Jianhu's injured right leg and discussing something in low voices. Hearing someone enter, Zhang Feng subconsciously turned around. When he saw Li Chengxian, he waved at him and said, "You've come at the right time. Little Tiger needs blood urgently. I need a few things. Go find them for me immediately. I want to give Little Tiger a blood transfusion." A blood transfusion? Li Chengxian and the others were unfamiliar with this term. They all knew what it was. At this moment, there was a commotion outside the door. Zhang Feng seemed to be afraid of disturbing Niu Jianhu. When he went out, he saw Yu Baolin kneeling in front of the tent with red eyes, carrying 3 people in uniform. When he saw Zhang Feng, Yu Qi Baolin looked at Zhang Feng and said, I just eavesdropped on your conversation. I heard that you want to give Little Tiger a blood transfusion. Do you think these 3 people are enough? If not, we still have a lot more. How many do you want?" When he saw Zhang Feng hesitate, Yu Qi Baolin gritted his teeth and said, "If it really doesn't work, we can use my blood. Little Tiger saved my life before anyway. I'll just treat it as paying him back with my life." Zhang Feng couldn't help but admire Yu Qi Baolin. He couldn't help but give Yu Qi Baolin a thumbs up. What a good man. This was a true brother. When Zhang Feng heard this, he gave a rough explanation of blood transfusions, blood types, and so on. Then, he saw a large hand slap the back of Yu Qi Baolin's neck. "Lao Tzu isn't dead yet. When will it be your turn?" Yu Qigong pushed Yu Qi Baolin aside and stood in front of Zhang Feng. His eyes were red as he asked, "Feng Zi, does it have to be our own blood or human blood?" Yu Qigong's killing intent seemed to be brewing. He seemed to be very emotional. Zhang Feng was a little speechless. He sighed and said, "Yes, old Yu. As long as it's human blood and the blood type is suitable, it won't be a problem. The key is matching the blood type." Before Zhang Feng could finish, Yu Qigong roared angrily. In an instant, a dozen Turks who had been tied up with ropes were brought forward. Yu Qigong reprimanded them. "Look at these guys. Can't they do it?" Zhang Feng was a little speechless. He quickly said, I'm not sure either. We'll have to do a blood test first. Then do a blood test. How do we do it? Do we kill them first? Chapter 1132. A blood test could be said to be simple, but it could also be said to be difficult. In the future, a blood test was the simplest thing to do. It only needed a piece of test paper, a straw, and a needle to solve the problem. But where was this? This was the Tang dynasty. Everything had to be made by himself. Just now, he was talking to Sun Simiao about this. The glass was easy to make. Zhang Feng took off the sunglasses he carried with him, but the remaining things were difficult. Zhang Feng thought for a long time before he finally found something that could be used for the blood type test. Zhang Feng did not have time to think about these things at this time. He picked up a sterilized dagger and cut the fingers of the Turks one by one. He squeezed out a drop of blood and dripped it on the self-made test paper. Then he put it on a large copper tray. Under the tray was a tray of warm water. At this time, the wet paper on the snow was rippling with the water. Zhang Feng's eyes were fixed on the test paper. The mark was very simple. It was 5 red lines, but they were arranged horizontally in an order. It took Zhang Feng a lot of effort to remember the sequence. He didn't know whether or not he had used a red card. He could only pray to the heavens in his heart. But fortunately, Lu Jianhu was a blood player. It wasn't a lot of facts. He just needed to prepare the blood needed for the surgery. As for what happened after, this kid's body was strong and should be able to survive. After all, this was all he could do. He was a little doubtful and missed the medical equipment of the future. If he had a set of equipment in the Tang dynasty, or if he could activate his golden finger, how good would it be? If he encountered such a thing again, he would not have to worry so much. But it was useless to think too much. The most important thing at this time was to quickly think of a way to solve the blood problem. After testing 3 people in a row and still failing, Zhang Feng could not help but feel a little discouraged and anxious. Suddenly, Zhang Feng seemed to have thought of something. In ancient times, there was no scientific basis for the blood test. However, it seemed to have seen a video explanation on Bilibili. Although there was no scientific basis for this method, it could still test the simplest kind of matching or similar blood type experiment. He could not help but feel happy. He hurriedly followed a small bowl of water into the tent. He carefully pricked a drop of blood on Niu Jianhu's finger and dripped it into the bowl. Then he drilled out of the tent again. After repeating this process 9 times, he finally found 3 people with matching blood types among the 9 slaves. Now that the blood problem was finally solved, Yu Qigong wanted to say something but hesitated. But after thinking about it, he held himself back. In the end, Yu Qigong couldn't help but ask with a guilty conscience, "This is a matter of life and death. Are you sure you can do that?" Zhang Feng carefully searched his mind for knowledge in this area. After confirming that there was no mistake, he said, "Don't worry. We are all brothers. I will do my best." Yu Qigong heard this and sighed heavily. "Just do it. No matter what kind of psychological pressure you have, even if you can't save him, I believe old Niu won't say anything." Zhang Feng's eyes reddened as he glared at Yu Qigong. "Who the hell said I can't do it? If you are a man, you can't say you can't do it." As he spoke, Zhang Feng blocked everyone outside and went into the tent alone. At this time, Niu Juanda rushed into the tent. As soon as he entered the military camp, Niu Juanda saw the people outside the tent. His heart could not help but thump. He felt dizzy and fell off the horse's back. Everyone was so frightened that they hurried over and helped Niu Juanda up. After Niu Juanda woke up a little, he grabbed Yu Qigong's hand and asked in a trembling voice, "Brother, my family's who Don't worry, old Niu. With Feng Zi here, it should be fine. You know this kid, he has a lot of ideas." When Niu Juanda heard this, he laughed bitterly and did not say anything. He did not want to put pressure on Zhang Feng, but he also wanted to protect his son. However, he also knew the meaning behind Yu Qigong's words. He could only drag his heavy steps to the side and squat on the ground. He stared blankly into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 1133. At this time, Zhang Feng, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly lifted the curtain of the tent. He shouted to the outside, Bring in the 3 people who were marked just now." Hearing this, everyone could not help but be happy. Nyo Jinda was still squatting there like a wooden sculpture, pretending that he did not hear anything. After being in the army for so many years, he had also encountered such things. Every time he met those soldiers, the final outcome was extremely miserable. Even now, he could still clearly remember the horrible scene before those people died. He did not expect that it would happen to his son at this time. Nyo Jinda did not know if this was retribution or something else. Yuchigong looked at Nyo Jinda and sighed heavily, but he did not say anything. At this time, Zhang Feng looked at the 3 tied-up Turks being brought into the tent and kneeling in front of Zhang Feng. Although they did not know what Zhang Feng's people were talking about, their intuition told them that it was definitely not something good. They desperately shrank back and struggled. Even when several burly men grabbed their hands and brought them in front of Zhang Feng, the 3 people were still trembling with fear. At this time, Zhang Feng suddenly felt like he was a person from Sakura Island. After stepping on the blood from their hands again to confirm the blood type, Zhang Feng ordered several burly men to wash the arms of the 3 people well. He did not know whether these Turks were born like this or what. Their hands were full of greasy stains, as if they had been soaked in mud. Zhang Feng did not want Niu Xiaohu to die of a bacterial infection. The 3 Turks were washed clean. At this time, except for a piece of cloth, their bodies were as red as cooked shrimps. Obviously, the bath just now was very uncomfortable. Although the 3 of them were blindfolded, their instincts made them struggle desperately. Under the efforts of several burly men, they were forced into the tent. The 3 of them were still forced into the tent. On the soft mattress, Zhang Feng used a bamboo pole, the urine bladder he obtained from the mule, and the intestines of a carp. There were also 2 hollow fish bones. The hollow fish bones were connected to the 2 ends of the fish intestines. One end was above the mule's urine, hanging high on a frame, and the other end was dripping with a drop of alcohol. After several burly men knocked the 3 Turks unconscious and fixed them on the frame, Zhang Feng's guilt made him say "Umitba" several times in his heart. Just like the imperial army, he suddenly felt that, in order to be a good brother, Zhang Feng forcibly brainwashed himself. This was the Tang dynasty, this was the Tang dynasty. Gritting his teeth, Zhang Feng rubbed the alcohol on the shoulder of a Turk, and then stabbed the fish bone fiercely. In Zhang Feng's worry, the black blood slowly flowed into the mule's urine. Seeing this, Zhang Feng's face lit up. He hurriedly took out another tube which was connected to the hollow fish bones and the fish intestines from the alcohol basin and pierced it into the urine. After the blood slowly flowed out from the other end of the tube, Zhang Feng carefully inserted the fish bone into Niu Jianhu's artery. After carefully observing for a moment and seeing that the blood was slowly and orderly entering Niu Jianhu's body, Zhang Feng let out a long sigh of relief. However, at this time, Zhang Feng didn't dare to relax. After all, he had never tried this method before, especially when he wasn't sure if the blood type really matched. He waited for another half an hour. Niu Jianhu's originally weak breath slowly changed, gradually becoming longer. His chest also slowly regained a trace of vitality, rising and falling rhythmically. His slightly purple lips also began to have a touch of blood. Only then did Zhang Feng heave a sigh of relief. He quietly walked to the door and waved his hand at Sun Simiao. Sun Simiao hurriedly entered the tent. When he saw this magical scene, he didn't have time to marvel. Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "Let's check his pulse first and see if this method is effective." Sun Simiao didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly put his hand on Niu Jianhu's pulse. When he saw that the pulse was gradually stabilizing, he was relieved. "It's done." This sentence seemed to affirm Zhang Feng's efforts at this time. Zhang Feng sat down on the chair like a deflated balloon. He let out a few long gasps. After hearing Sun Simiao's affirmation, Li Chengqian, who was lying at the door, exclaimed in a low voice, "Xiaohu is alive! Xiaohu is alive!" Hearing this, everyone was pleasantly surprised and cried tears of joy. Yuchigong instinctively glanced at Niu Jinda and sighed heavily. No one knew better than him how his old friend felt at this time. Patting Niu Jinda's shoulder, Yuchigong sighed and said, "Xiaohu is fine." Hearing this, Niu Jinda was stunned. He wanted to refute, but when he opened his mouth, he didn't know what to say. He didn't even bother to take the cigarette. He hurriedly got up from the ground and rushed into the tent. He looked at the strangely shaped blood transfusion device. Then he looked at Niu Jianhu, who seemed to be sleeping soundly. Niu Jinda, who was like an iron tower, suddenly burst into tears. Chapter 11:34. Zhang Feng was afraid that the agitated Niu Jinda would affect Niu Jianhu's recovery. She hurriedly pulled him back and motioned for him to calm down. However, who could endure this kind of thing? Niu Jinda suppressed the excitement in his heart and took a deep breath before asking in a low voice, "Fengzi, is Xiaohu really okay?" Zhang Feng nodded heavily and looked at Niu Jianhu. Under the first step, Xiaohu's life is saved. However, if he wants to recover his leg, he still needs a few days. At the very least, he needs to recover his lost qi and blood first. Let him recover some of his physical strength before he can undergo surgery. Surgery to set the bone. Niu Jinda didn't know what surgery was, but when he heard Zhang Feng's words, he knew that Niu Jianhu would definitely not die. Thus, he made a gesture to kneel down. Zhang Feng hurriedly hugged Niu Jinda tightly and said, "Old Niu, if you dare to kneel down, then our brotherhood will come to an end. I, Zhang Feng, will turn around and leave now. I will never acknowledge you as my brother again." When Niu Jinda heard this, he didn't know whether to kneel or stand. After pondering for a moment, he rubbed Zhang Feng's head. Although Zhang Feng hated it when others touched her head, she also understood how a father felt at this moment. Cough, cough, cough. At this moment, a sudden coughing sound caused everyone inside and outside the tent to hold their breaths. Zhang Feng, Sun Simiao, and the other three hurriedly looked at Niu Jianhu on the bed. Niu Jianhu had unknowingly opened his eyes. Although it was a little weak, Niu Jianhu still forced himself to stay awake. He looked at Zhang Feng with a bitter smile and said, "Fengzi, I'm useless. I've caused you trouble." Zhang Feng's eyes became hot. She patted Niu Jianhu's shoulder and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? You've already done enough. Don't think too much about it. Just focus on recuperating. In a few days, I'll let you witness a miracle. Lao Tzu will let you climb back up just like how you fell." Niu Jianhu laughed bitterly when he heard this. He knew that he couldn't keep his leg. He thought that Zhang Feng was comforting him, so he nodded respectfully and agreed. Only then did Niu Jianhu look at Niu Jinda and call him father with a choked voice. Niu Jinda shuddered when he heard the word father. Although he tried to hold back his tears, his trembling body betrayed him. Niu Jinda sighed hoarsely. Niu Jianhu comforted him. "It's all my fault. I was careless. I hope father won't blame others. I didn't do well enough." I know. Just focus on recuperating. Fengzi said that you'll be able to walk in 2 months. Don't think too much about it. Otherwise, Fengzi will be busy for half a day. Don't cause trouble for lunatic. However, before he could finish, Niu Jianhu fell into a coma again. When he woke up this time, everyone could finally breathe a sigh of relief. When everyone saw that Niu Jianhu had fainted, they wanted to say something. However, Zhang Feng waved his hand, indicating that he was fine and that he had just lost a lot of blood. Then he asked everyone to leave the tent. At that moment, only Zhang Feng, Sun Simiao, the unconscious Turk, and Niu Jianhu were left in the tent. Zhang Feng looked at Niu Jianhu and said, "Elder son, we only have 3 days to prepare. After 3 days, regardless of whether it succeeds or not, this surgery must be done. If we don't do it on his leg, the wound and bones will become infected. When that time comes, we'll have to amputate his leg." Sun Simiao frowned slightly. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He just faintly agreed. After all, the military camp wasn't a place to stay for long. When Niu Jianhu's condition improved slightly, Zhang Feng made a stretcher and ordered someone to send him back to the academy. After all, there were many things that weren't easy to use in the military camp. For example, there were some materials for experiments and surgery, as well as some anti-inflammatory and disinfectant items. When they were on the mountain, they had prepared a lot of things when they had nothing to do. When they came, they didn't know what was going on, so they just picked up the important things and brought some. As soon as they left the military camp, Zhang Feng looked at Chen Chumo and couldn't help but ask, "Why haven't I seen General Yuqi or General Chen since I came from the military camp? It's been more than 2 hours." Chen Chumeng had long known that Zhang Feng would ask this. After all, everyone would ask the same question. How could there be such a person in the military camp? He felt a little helpless, but he looked at his shoulder and asked, "Do you think that if someone went up the mountain to look for you, you would definitely be on the mountain?" This question made Zhang Feng a little surprised. Chen Tiniu was right. According to the usual practice of the Tang dynasty, Chang Yaojin might not be here at this time because of other things. After all, such a big thing had happened before, so it would be strange if Chang Yaojin could sit still in the military camp. As for Yuqigong, Zhang Feng really didn't know. Zhang Feng also wanted to meet the 2 legendary gods of war of the Tang dynasty. But at this time, it seemed that it was not fate. Then, he shook his head and went up the mountain in silence. After going up the mountain, Mr. Zhang Feng ordered people to use mugwort to empty a cabin that Chen Chumo and the others had built separately. He smoked the whole cabin with mugwort inside and outside before he let Niu Jianhu in. Chapter 11:35. Dugo watched all this with his eyes wide open. He opened his mouth, but in the end, he couldn't say a word. He could only stand aside silently, as if this room belonged to him. But Zhang Feng didn't care about this anymore. There was only a broken wound on Niu Jianhu's leg, but there was also a wound on his arm that seemed to be caused by something. The wound was about 12 centimeters long, but it was only a superficial wound. At this time, the blood had already dried up. Zhang Feng speculated that it might have been caused by a scrape or something on the wooden pile after falling down when climbing the net wall. At this time, it couldn't be seen. Zhang Feng took the cotton dipped in alcohol with tweezers and carefully cleaned Niu Jianhu's arm. He even shaved off the hair on his arm. He didn't want Niu Jianhu, who had survived with great difficulty, to have any sequelae. Therefore, before doing everything, he disinfected with alcohol again and again. At this time, Sun Simiao had completely become his assistant. Each of them took a needle and carefully stitched up the wound. Although Sun Simiao's hands were trembling badly, and the stitches were twisted and turned, he still persisted. Anyway, this Niu Xiaohu didn't rely on his appearance to earn a living. Moreover, only the inner side of his arm was exposed. Ordinary people wouldn't notice the wound on his hand unless they looked carefully. It was already good enough that a man didn't die. How could he be picky? The Turk who transfused blood to Lu Xiaohu had died before the blood transfusion was completed. He didn't die from blood transfusion, but was deeply frightened to death. As for the death of the Turk, although Zhang Feng felt a little guilty, other people didn't have any reaction to it. It seemed that the death of the Turk was not as worthy of their sympathy as the death of a sheep. Zhang Feng also didn't understand what was going on. In the end, he could only conclude that the people at this time were tough. Thinking about it in reverse, if the people of the Tang dynasty fell into the hands of the Turks, their end would be even more tragic. Zhang Feng also thought of this at this moment. He shook his head and reminisced. Zhang Feng invited Sun Simiao up the mountain for a certain purpose. Although teaching was one aspect, he invited Sun Simiao up the mountain in name to make the bone-strengthening soup and 8 treasure porridge. If he really wanted to make those things, he could make them in one day. Zhang Feng had never told Sun Simiao the truth. He was looking for some medicinal herbs to treat red wounds. These things were just some of the things that Zhang Feng thought of according to the formulas in his memory. However, this was not a difficult task for Sun Simiao, even though Sun Simiao did not know what cephalosporin was and what amoxicillin was. But when he heard that it was something to reduce inflammation, stop bleeding, and promote blood circulation, he immediately listed more than a dozen prescriptions for Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng was stunned. In the end, Zhang Feng remembered the process of making penicillin mentioned in the textbook before. He simply made a set of experimental equipment and collected some penicillin. This thing was too precious. Zhang Feng hesitated for a long time. Then, he gritted his teeth and took out a porcelain bottle from his arms. The porcelain bottle was not big, only the size of a walnut. But even so, it took Zhang Feng half a month to collect this small bottle of penicillin. At this time, Zhang Feng wanted to pour the penicillin powder on Niu Jianhu's 2 wounds, But after thinking about it, he poured some back and slowly sprinkled it with his fingers. This thing was too precious. He would need it during the surgery. If he gave it to Niu Jianhu at this time, what would happen if he bled out during the surgery? Moreover, these people had infinite strength and were as strong as bulls. Zhang Feng could only hope that their bodies could bear it. Later, he found Li Gan and the others to take care of Niu Xiaohu. Then, he threw the medicine that Sun Simiao brought to them. Sun Simiao also told them how to take the medicine and so on. Finally, the two of them walked out of the cabin. As soon as they walked out, Sun Simiao saw Zhang Feng's dignified face and asked with a smile, "Don't you already know how to perform the surgery? Why do you like it now? And you have a lot on your mind." Zhang Feng shook his head with difficulty. "It's no problem to experiment on animals with this thing, but did you see the mule come back to life later?" When he said this, Sun Simiao could not help but be stunned. It seemed that the mule did not come back to life in the end. Chapter 1136. Sun Simiao didn't understand why Zhang Feng was still thinking about the mule at this time. On second thought, he felt that what Zhang Feng said was not unreasonable. If the mule was already like this, then if it was used on people, although Luozi's leg was broken by someone, and it was broken in 2 or 3 sections, this was not the main point. In the end, it was still connected. The main point was the process of how to connect the bones. This was the main point. Sun Simiao was also a smart person. He didn't need Zhang Feng to explain it in detail. He already knew the knack of it. "Do you mean that you want to continue the experiment? And these 3 days are the time left for the experiment?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "Indeed, but these 3 days are for the two of us. I don't know if Elder Sun dares to accept it. After all, I've said before that I only know a little bit. If I really want to use a knife, I'll have to rely on Mr. Sunday. I'm just a person who fishes for fame. If I really want to use a knife, I'll tremble." Sun Simiao laughed and said, "If that's the case, then old man will go back first and think about it carefully. How should we do this thing? But do you think this kid can last for 3 days?" Zhang Feng nodded. 3 days is definitely not a problem. After all, the bone contusion and muscle damage are too serious, so we have to wait for his wound function to recover a little. There are some things that I can't tell you in 1 or 2 sentences for the time being. After dealing with Xiaoniu's matter, I will tell you in detail. How about the whole process of this operation?" Hearing this, Sun Simiao nodded with satisfaction. But the next moment, Sun Simiao said earnestly, "Kid, I know you are kind, but it also depends on the place. The blood to create life, the blood to return the soul, and the bone connection technique have never happened since ancient times. You should also know what the consequences will be if this matter is spread out." Zhang Feng was worried about this. He sighed and said, "Elder Sun, I know everything you said, but you have to give me some time. After all, it's a matter of life and death. I was too agitated back then and didn't care about anything else. However, I don't think anyone will care about something like that." Sun Simiao looked at Zhang Feng meaningfully. Then, without saying a word, he went to prepare for the operation on Hua Xiaohu. After sending off Sun Simiao, Zhang Feng dragged his tired body back to the cabin. Just as he was about to sit down, he realized that Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong were quietly sitting on the side of the recliner, staring at him. This scared Zhang Feng so much that he trembled. Without waiting for Zhang Feng to speak, Yu Qigong stared at Zhang Feng and asked, "Kid, I'm going to ask you a question. You have to answer me seriously. You can steal blood and return souls?" Yu Qigong's eyes were fixed on Zhang Feng. He was just short of sticking his face to him. Zhang Feng turned his head with some difficulty. He was not used to talking to people like this. "I can't." Yu Qigong's question was too ambiguous. Moreover, Zhang Feng was still thinking about Sun Simiao's words and the look in his eyes when he left. Therefore, he made a prompt decision to deny it. Otherwise, who knew if this old man would think of a way to make him use the blood-stealing soul-returning technique again. That would be troublesome. However, Yu Qigong obviously had no intention of letting him go. He asked again, "Why did you take a section of fish intestines and 2 hollow fish bones to draw blood into Little Tiger's body?" Little Tiger came back to life, but the Tujua died. If this isn't blood-stealing soul-returning technique, Then what is? Yuchi Gong's eyes were burning with flames as he stared at Zhang Feng. He seemed to be trying to figure out something from Zhang Feng's every move. Zhang Feng was speechless when he saw Yuchi Gong's burning gaze. How could I tell you this? This is some common knowledge that I need to learn during the military training held by the school twice a year. However, it's only common knowledge. This is the first time I've performed a blood transfusion and sutured a wound. If I say this, won't you slice me up on the spot? Don't you think you'll cut me up on the spot? Just like what the doctor in the military training class said, saving lives was just like that. The more you treated the other person as a human, the more likely you were to save them. Humans were actually very strong. There were people in ancient times who scraped the bones of Guan Yu and Guan Yunchang to heal their wounds. The main thing was that Fei did not remember it. After all, he was not omnipotent. He could remember everything clearly. Western medicine originated from barbers. If one could cut people's hair, one could become a doctor. Perhaps even the stupid pig craftsman could become a founder. Letting blood out was a cure for all kinds of diseases. If the feet hurt, the hands would be chopped off. If the hands hurt, the hands would be chopped off. As for headaches, there was no way to treat them. If Lao Tzu knew how to disinfect the brain with alcohol, it was simply a groundbreaking invention. When it came to the latter, wouldn't they worship him like he was their ancestor? Chapter 1137. Just as a madman once said, "What's so great about a car? It's just an engine for people and a metal box." How wise is that? Anyway, I heard that his car company is very popular, and I haven't heard of any major problems. Similarly, what is a person? 2 arms and 2 legs at home, a body full of carbohydrates. If you know the cause, you can treat it casually. Didn't you see that the calf came back to life? As long as the calf can come back to life, it proves that my theory is correct and must be carried forward. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng's heart calmed down. Xiaohu had an accidental fracture, so you also saw that bone fragment. If you don't stop the bleeding, he might really die. If he loses too much blood, find someone with the same blood type to give him a blood transfusion and he'll come back to life. Do you still need to ask? Zhang Feng seriously doubted whether he was playing the lute to a cow. Discussing blood types with the ancients was purely because he had nothing better to do. Sure enough, Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong both blushed and stared at Zhang Feng as if they wanted to swallow him whole. Zhang Feng hurriedly begged for mercy, saying that he had just finished the operation to treat Xiaohu's injuries and had exhausted a lot of energy. Only then did he succeed in fooling the 2 people. However, it was clear that Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong had no intention of letting Zhang Feng go. After Zhang Feng lay back on the recliner, the 2 lit up their cigarettes and sat on either side of Zhang Feng. They asked, "Feng Zi, your medical skills were all taught by your master. Then tell us, other than being able to set bones, change blood, and take lives, what else can you do?" Zhang Feng knew that the 2 of them would not let him go. Smoking, he made up a lie. "My master said that learning these things is only a small path after all. There are many things that my teacher is not willing to teach me. He said that life is full of troubles, and it's enough as long as I don't get cheated by others. The more I learn, the more trouble I will have. He hopes that I can live a simple life. Heaven and earth have their own rules, and forceful interference will only add new troubles. It's better to let nature take its course. I understand. I've seen my master perform these things before, and I'm just copying them." Zhang Feng had no choice but to brag to the psychiatrist during his military training and set up a high ranking for him. Yu Qigong was a bit disappointed that Zhang Feng didn't live up to his expectations. He was a bit depressed, but he couldn't say a word as he looked at Zhang Feng for a long time. In his opinion, Zhang Feng had such a miraculous master every day, and he only learned a little about medicine. Which one of these skills wasn't earth-shattering? However, Yu Qigong looked at Zhang Feng for a long time and didn't know who to blame, so he put down his hand. After all, Zhang Feng had already done a good job, and as he said, his master had only taught him for a very short period of time. It was already enough for him to learn so much. Moreover, it was already good enough that he could change the legs and blood of Niu Jian, who after seeing it a few times. If it was another person, they would probably be scared to death at this time. How would they dare to do such a thing? Chun Yaojin rolled his eyes and said with a laugh, Feng Zi is so capable. As his older brother, I'll be blessed in the future. If I have any difficulties in the future, I'll look for you. Old you, this is Feng Zi's secret. Why do you care where Feng Zi learned it from? A blind cat, a dead cat, a cat that catches mice is a good cat. Don't you understand this principle? Cheng Yaojin repeatedly gave Yu Qigong a look, then hugged Zhang Feng and said with a laugh, "Let's not talk about these annoying things. Let me show you something good. Old Niu told me to give it to you." Cheng Yaojin's mind was more lively. It wasn't that he was careless. If Cheng Yaojin was really careless, then you were the real idiot. Which person who could become a duke wasn't a shrewd person. However, compared to Cheng Yaojin's simple-mindedness, Yu Qigong was somewhat depressed. He walked out of Zhang Feng's small wooden house and smoked while squatting at the door to study the strange blood transfusion equipment. The equipment was very simple. In fact, it was just a piece of fish intestine, 2 hollow fish bones, and a mule whose leg had just been broken by her. Yu Qigong couldn't help but be deeply shocked. However, at this time, looking at the two laughing and joking around, Yu Qigong couldn't help but smile. When a person became younger, their heart also seemed to become younger. Zhang Feng, who was 34 or 35 years old mentally, and a person who was actually close to 30 years old. However, the strange thing was that Zhang Feng didn't have any real generation gap. Compared to Yu Qigong, Zhang Feng preferred to spend time with Old Chen. Old Chen's thoughts were very simple and he was a very good person. This made Zhang Feng very happy. After all, every time he spent time with Old Chen, his mind and body would be extremely relaxed. Zhang Feng couldn't remember when was the last time he laughed and joked around without hiding anything. Maybe it was a month ago. Chapter 1138. Since he had nothing to do, Zhang Feng curiously asked, "Old Chen, do you know what's going on with those Turkic slaves in the army? They seem to have just been sent here." "You can even tell?" Zhang Feng rolled his eyes. "I'm not a fool. I really can't tell. What do you take your brother for?" Chen Yaojin laughed and told Wang Zhong the whole story. During this period of time, more and more soldiers had been garrisoned in the Lanzhou and Liangzhou camps, even extending to Chotzi City. However, with more people, more military supplies were transported. This also attracted the attention of the Turks who were pacing back and forth on the east side of the hall. They were also short on supplies, and they didn't even have enough to eat. When they saw a long line of caravans, there were naturally people who were willing to take the risk. The ones who were caught were a group of Turkic scouts. Half a month ago, according to Old Chen, his camp had been ambushed by these people. After sacrificing more than 30 people, Old Chen's subordinates had finally managed to kill these Turks. Even so, these people were still lying on the salt bags like mad dogs, crazily eating the salt one handful after another. They also lacked salt. Cheng Yaojin had kept the price of salt at 1 yuan per caddy. Moreover, there was a price but no supply. How could this not cause resentment among the people? Cheng Yaojin opened up the supply of vinegar cloth and a small amount of fine salt to eat. At least it had the taste of salt. Anyway, the common people usually didn't eat much salt. The purpose of this was to strictly prevent the Turks and the streamers from causing trouble and spreading this precious thing. After all, the salt sold to the public at this time was poisonous. This was something only a few of them knew. If the matter of these years was spread out, it would be big trouble. Therefore, Cheng Yaojin did not care about anything else and kept these people here. In this regard, Zhang Feng also faintly felt that the Turks lacked salt. The Turks' geographical location was very special, belonging to the high-altitude plateau. No one could last more than a few days in a high-intensity activity. Moreover, the situation was unclear at this time, and the Tang army had dispatched so many troops to sneak here. In order to survive, these Turks were originally good at long-range raids, so they had evil thoughts. They took the risk out of desperation, and when Cheng Yaojin and the others were not paying attention, they were able to take advantage of the loophole. However, they didn't expect that this group of caravans was actually the transport team of the officials of the Tang dynasty. Those who could escort the officials were all good men in the army. In this battle, Cheng Yaojin lost more than 30 people. One could imagine how tragic this battle was. According to Cheng Yaojin, only a few of the 7 Turkic fishermen were left alive. They even knew how to open a trap and brought them back. As for the rest, regardless of whether they were crippled or not, they were all killed. Thus, the scene that her husband saw in the camp happened. Living in a peaceful world, when had she ever experienced such a tragedy? That was more than 100 fresh lives. Just because of a mouthful of salt and a mouthful of rice, they lost their lives. In Zhang Feng's view, this was simply inconceivable. For him, not to mention a gene of salt, even 2,000 gene of 1 yuan was only worth 2 to 3,000 yuan in the future. Even if it broke the sky, it would only be worth 4 to 5,000 yuan. More than 100 Turks were all killed for this thing. Zhang Feng didn't think that the other dozen people who fell into Old Chen's hands could survive safely. After all, Old Chen was only a businessman. The real power to execute these people was in the hands of the 2 great generals in the army. However, even if one's head was cut off, it would only be a scar the size of a bowl. Why did rich people cherish their lives more? As the saying goes, the richer you are, the more afraid of death. This was an eternal truth. Poor people lived a life of suffering. If they couldn't even bear this, there was no need for them to live. They couldn't stay in the house anymore. There were 2 big chimneys. God knew how long they had been smoking in the house. At this time, after smoking 2 cigarettes, Zhang Feng was so choked that he couldn't speak. He hurriedly went out to see the sun. He simply lay on the grass and looked up at the clouds in the sky that came and went in a hurry. Seeing this, Chang Yaojin and Yu Qigong smiled and lay on the grass and looked up at the sky like Zhang Feng. The sky around Xi'an in the Tang dynasty was very pure. There wasn't a trace of pollution. It was as pure as a newborn baby. The sky was so blue that it was a little dark. The clouds in the sky were like a bunch of cotton ready to fight in the air. When the wind blew, the clouds would ripple. Looking at the deep black, there was a sense of vicissitudes of mystery in the dark blue. Unlike in the future, it was extremely rare to see a trace of blue in the sky of Xi'an. Not to mention Xi'an, it was also extremely rare to see such a pure blue sky in other places. Chapter 1139. The weather at the beginning of August was very strange. From morning to night it was extremely cold. Especially at night it was as cold as winter. However, at noon it was very hot. It was even hotter than summer. At this moment, the entire academy was filled with people who were moving construction materials in a hurry. At this time, when he looked around, he saw a group of men with their crotches wrapped in cloth. They were carrying construction materials or wood and running around under the sun. Their bodies were as black ghosts. Zhang Fengyu suddenly had the illusion that he had entered a Japanese military camp. Zhang Feng was a little speechless. He was looking for something in the crowd. However, he suddenly saw Chang Chumo and the others who were carrying food bowls. They were talking and laughing as they walked while removing clothes. His eyelids couldn't help but twitch. These people were also doing the same. This was a disgrace to the educated. Zhang Feng also didn't have the desire to continue looking. He thought that if he really couldn't stand such a crude scene, especially in the academy that he had single-handedly managed, then he, Zhang Feng, would really eat that thing? He found some linen and then found the old village chief. After asking him, he found a few men who knew how to sew in Tonghui Square. He then went to the sticky candy at the foot of the mountain and found some rubber that was dripping and solidifying. It was the kind of rubber that was thinner than chopsticks. The longer the rubber was boiled, the better its toughness would be. In fact, when the materials and people were all here, Zhang Feng even drew and gestured on the paper to let them understand that he was going to make a few pairs of underwear. However, even so, Zhang Feng and Zhang Fei were useless. It took a lot of talking to make these people understand. After all, it was still very difficult to make them understand one thing. After wasting 2 hours, Yu Qigong and Qin Yaojin were a little tired. They yawned and went down the mountain. Zhang Feng didn't know. After explaining for a long time, everyone finally understood. Zhang Feng dragged his tired body and went to sleep. The next morning, Zhang Feng received a pair of boxers that had been made in a hurry. Looking at the size, he was quite satisfied with the elasticity of the rubber. He rewarded all of them with 3 taels of silver each, causing them to tremble all over and repeatedly say that they did not want it. To be able to obtain Zhang Feng's satisfaction was a piece of great news for these people on the mountain. After the tailor finished kowtowing, he walked away happily. As he walked, he muttered excitedly, "The prince is arrogant, the dean is worthless, and he even thanked me with a smile. My God, this is logic. This high and mighty profession actually treated me like this. How dare they treat me like this? The principal even praised me. From now on, I will also be someone who has been specially praised by the principal. Let's see who dares to not treat me well in the future." Zhang Feng didn't know that he had unintentionally become a tiger. He took the pair of boxers that looked a little too big and rushed to the residence of Chen Chumo and the others. At this time, Chang Chumo's people seemed to have just finished their morning exercise. At this time, a group of people were next to the wooden bucket at the door. They took off all their clothes and washed up. Everyone was tired under their crotches. They shamelessly showed off their not-so-perfect figures in broad daylight. Chan Chumo's black hair made Zhang Feng wonder if this guy had completed his evolution. When they saw Zhang Feng coming, they restrained themselves a little. They didn't intend to avoid arousing suspicion. While washing, Chen Chumo waved his hand and said, "Feng Zi, why are you here so early? Do you want to wash together? The water has just been boiled and is still warm. The temperature is good for washing now." Zhang Feng looked at them with some disdain. However, he was once again sure of one thing. That was, he must build a bathhouse for these guys. Otherwise, the atmosphere on the mountain would be foul. He didn't want to see a group of people wearing boxers walking around blindly when he opened the door to save people. It was fine for him, but what about Zhang Yuyao and the others? What if they bumped into them? "Tainyo, come here. I made a pair of underwear. Put it on and have a look." "Underwear? What's that?" Hearing this, Chun Chumo and the others looked curiously at the linen thing in Zhang Feng's hand. They didn't even intend to wipe off the water droplets on their bodies and hurriedly gathered around. At this time, after taking a bath, the smell of their feet, sweat, and someone's body odor had been reduced a little. Zhang Feng also didn't feel so dizzy. Only then did he shake the two small corners of the thong in his hand. With this, they instantly looked at the boxers under their crotch. Chun Chumo pointed at the boxers and then at his own boxers and said curiously, "Feng Zi, I remember that I saw you wearing this thing when you took a bath. Is this?" Hearing this, Zhang Feng's eyes instantly turned red. He bared his teeth and asked, "Tell me clearly, when did you see me take a bath?" Chang Chumo knew that he had said something wrong. After stammering for a while, he laughed and then bypassed this matter. Obviously, Zhang Feng didn't. He meant to forgive them. Chapter 1140. At this moment, Zhang Feng suddenly caught a glimpse of Yu Qigong walking out of Niu Xiaohu's house. He was smoking and staring at the thong in Zhang Feng's hand. Zhang Feng was a little surprised, but he understood after thinking about it. He asked, "How's Xiaohu's injury?" "He's fine. He drank a bowl of bone-strengthening powder this morning and fell asleep again. His complexion has recovered a lot. Other than his leg being unable to move, he's basically no different from a good person." Yu Qigong's mood was a little better today, but when he saw the strange thing in Zhang Feng's hand, he asked curiously, "What is this?" Seeing this, Zhang Feng shook the thong in his hand and said, "This is that, crotch cloth. I don't know what's going on these days. They all like to wear crotch cloth when running around. It's a disgrace to the academy. So when I saw them like this yesterday, I really couldn't bear to look at them. So I got someone to make one for them to try first. If it fits, then I'll get someone to. Leave this matter to me. You should take a good rest. Treat Xiaohu's legs first. Leave these miscellaneous matters to me." Yu Qigong didn't wait for Zhang Feng to finish and interrupted him. He took over this matter. He also didn't know what this thing was and whether it would be awkward to wear. But since it was made by Zhang Feng, it was definitely a good thing. So Yu Qigong made a prompt decision and packed it up. After all, he had already taken over the textile factory. In his opinion, this thong should belong to this category. As long as it belonged to this category, he would be in charge. Zhang Feng was a little stunned, but before he could speak, Yu Qigong took the thong from him and threw it on Chan Chumo's head. "Go and change it for me now. Ask Lao Tzu to see what magical thing it is." Okay. Chen Chumo was overjoyed when he heard this. He hurriedly put the thing on his body in front of everyone, following Zhang Feng's instructions. After putting it on, Chen Chumo really did look better. Chen Chumo walked back and forth, even showing off his butt, twisting it in front of Zhang Feng. Looking at Zhang Feng, Chen Chumo was embarrassed, but he suppressed his embarrassment and pretended not to see it. This guy really deserved to be taught a lesson. Finally, Yu Qigong couldn't take it anymore. He scolded Chang Chumo angrily. "That's enough. What are you doing? Hurry up and put on your clothes." Hearing this, Chang Chumo resentfully put away his desire to show off. Anything that happened on the mountain would always reach Li Shimin's ears. At this moment, in the imperial study, Li Shimin was looking at Niu Jinda anxiously. After listening to Niu Jinda's detailed account of Lan Tian's situation, Li Shimin asked, "We heard that Jianhu's leg was broken? Is there such a thing? After hearing about it yesterday, we sent the imperial physician to the military camp. How is he now?" Niu Jinda was stunned when he heard this, then bowed and said, "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. My son was blind during training and broke his leg." Li Shimin heard this and his face was full of worry. He got up and came to Niu Jinda's side, patting him on the shoulder and said, "No one wants such a thing to happen, but I heard that Zhang Feng seemed to have gone to the military camp to pick him up. I heard that he has a way to fix his broken leg. Is this true?" "Yes." How could Niu Jinda dare to hide anything? He then told Li Shimin everything he saw after he went to the military camp, especially how Niu Jianhu woke up after Zhang Feng displayed that magical writing technique. Li Shimin was stunned when he heard this. There was actually such a thing in the world. There really were all kinds of strange things. At this time, Li Shimin even wanted to go up the mountain to see for himself how Zhang Feng fixed the bone, and even more wanted to see how he used other people's blood. However, Li Shimin was more interested in the set of equipment that Zhang Feng used to transfuse blood to Niu Jianhu. It was actually 2 fish intestines, a hollow fish bone, and a mule urine bubble. I don't want you to feel that way. He even had the impulse to test it himself, but now was not the time to talk about this. Li Shimin could only suppress the thoughts in his heart and asked, "Was everything okay when Jianhu was here?" 3 days later, did Fengzi say whether the bone could be fixed? Niu Jinda was stunned when he heard this. Not to mention Li Shimin now, he also didn't know. However, he didn't dare to not answer the emperor's question. After a moment of silence, he said, "It should be possible." Both of them couldn't help but be silent. Seeing this, Li Shimin sighed and said, "Heaven helps the worthy. Relax a little. If you believe that it can be done, then there should be no problem. Don't you believe in Fengzi's ability?" Li Shimin was also a little uncertain, but since it had happened at this time, and it was such a thing, he knew what to say and could only comfort him. Chapter 1141. Niu Jinda hurriedly thanked Li Shimin and was about to leave. Li Shimin thought for a while and felt that it was inappropriate. If we count today, there should be more. The surgery will be done the day after tomorrow. If it's the day after tomorrow, I'll go with you to take a look. On the mountain, Zhang Feng walked out of Niu Jianhu's room 2 hours later. He then went to change the gauze on Lu Jianhu's wound. After cleaning the wound and making sure that it was not infected, he heaved a sigh of relief. In this kind of situation, the scariest thing was inflammation and wound infection. However, on one hand, it was because of Niu Jianhu's strong physique. Coupled with his anti-inflammatory medicine, the greatest effect was still seen by Zhang Feng. It was the bowl of Chinese medicine that was placed beside Niu Jianhu. One had to know that although penicillin and alcohol could play an anti-inflammatory role, it could not reduce the swelling of Lu Jianhu's injured friend so quickly. Sun Simiao must have used some magical medicine to make Lu Jianhu's leg recover so quickly. After bandaging Lu Jianhu's wound again, Niu Jianhu looked at Zaifei, who was meticulously bandaging his wound. He felt a little guilty and said with slightly cracked lips, "Fengzi, if you can't do it, then forget it. Don't force yourself. At most, after 18 years will be another." Before he could finish, Zhang Feng glared at Niu Jianhu and said, "Shut up. If you're my brother, then don't say that. Don't you believe that I'm waiting for you? As long as you don't die, then I, your brother, can guarantee that you will recover." You only need to recuperate in peace. You can eat and drink as much as you want. But remember that you can't eat spicy food during this period of time. You can also not touch alcohol. Your diet can only be mainly bone-strengthening powder and some cooked food. Pork leg bone. Lu Jianhu nodded heavily with tears in his eyes. When Zhang Feng saw this, he felt a little depressed and did not know what to say. He left Niu Jianhu's room. Once he left, Chen Chumo and the others closed the door and started talking at once. It was Zhang Feng's turn. Little Tiger's head and leg injuries shouldn't be a big problem. There's no inflammation or infection at the moment. This is a very good sign. Zhang Feng did not dwell on this matter. After all, it was an endless process. Telling them was like playing the lute to a cow. It was far better than playing the lute to a cow. Sun Simiao was straightforward. After all, if you played the lute to a cow, would the cow understand? Hearing this, the few of them were relieved. They didn't know what was wrong with the weather at this time, but it was slowly becoming hot and dry again. The room was so stuffy that Zhang Feng couldn't breathe. At this time, he realized that the back of his clothes had long been soaked with sweat. Chang Chumo, as if he was presenting a treasure, revealed a jar of grape wine from under the bed and invited Zhang Feng to drink. However, after filling Zhang Feng's glass with wine, he took a bowl and gulped it down. The warm wine could instantly increase one's qi and blood. Zhang Feng slapped Chen Chumo's hand and said, "How can you spoil things like this? How can you drink this grape wine without ice?" Li Chengqian couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Fengzi, you actually know that grapes taste better with ice?" Seeing that Zhang Feng didn't speak, Li Chengqian said, "After the grape wine is chilled, it is indeed very refreshing to drink. However, at this time, where can we get this thing? Even in the ice cellar of the Imperial Palace, this thing is probably very rare." Hearing this, Zhang Feng's heart couldn't help but tremble. Shao Mountain is White Deer College. Tai Niu used some unknown ability to secretly hide a jar of grapes. If it weren't for you working hard during this period, he wouldn't have been willing to take out this plate of grapes. It was said that this grape wine was inadvertently given to Uncle Chun by Lord Zhangsun when he drank with his father last time. Hearing that it was given to Yuqi Jiaoliang from the Imperial Palace, Zhang Feng's eyes lit up. He hurriedly picked up the wine cup and sniffed it. It really was different from the usual grape wine. At this time, Chen Chumo, Wei Shuyu, and the people crossing the ditch had already been tempted by the chilled grape wine mentioned by Zhang Feng. Looking at the steaming grape wine, they no longer had the desire to drink wine. Chen Chumo licked his face and shook Zhang Feng's arm. He chuckled and said, "Fengzi, do you have a way to get ice? If that's the case, then it's really great. Tell me, where can we get ice? I'll send someone to get it now. As long as it's not too far away, maybe we can drink it tonight." Zhang Feng only thought of this method of artificial ice by chance. It was also during this period of time when Niu Xiaohu's leg was broken that he thought of it unintentionally. However, after hearing what he said, Zhang Feng also missed the iced grape wine a little. Chapter 1142. It is indeed impossible for others to make some ice now. Where would we get ice at this time? Unless we go to the ice cellar in the palace or go to the depths of the Turks, we might be able to get some if we go back to the Qi nation. But if we go back and forth, we might as well wait for winter in the main hall. Everyone was a little disappointed when they heard this, but Zhang Feng chuckled and said, "But I am talking about others. As long as you can find saltpeter, I can make the ice for you." Chang Chumo was too lazy to even ask about the method. He got up and rushed out of the room. Saltpeter was not easy to get, but he vaguely remembered that there were some saltpeter in the barracks at the foot of the mountain. Moreover, there were saltpeter in the smoke. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Chang Chumo came back with a big bag of saltpeter. Zhang Feng found a water jar and poured the saltpeter into it. Then, he directed a few people to pour more than half of the water into the vat. The water and the saltpeter produced a violent chemical reaction. The water splashed and there were occasional bursting sounds, as if the water was boiling. Those who saw it were greatly surprised. Under the gazes of the few people, the water surface gradually calmed down. Zhao Feng poured the prepared cold water into the copper basin and let the basin float on the water surface. Soon, under the astonished gazes of the few people, some white ripples began to appear on the water surface. Then, the white ripples gradually became clear. The bottomless water slowly turned into the color of rice soup. After what seemed like the time it took to eat a meal, the surface of the water jar was covered in white. It was like the kind of smoke that was spat out. It had accumulated all over the salt city. At this moment, the water in the copper basin began to slowly freeze. Moreover, it was rapidly freezing under everyone's gazes. Chang Chumo secretly touched it with his hand. Instantly, he retracted his hand as if he had been electrocuted. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said, F***CK? Brother, how did you do it? Isn't this the last few days of the hot summer? This is even hotter than June. You can actually make the water freeze. My God, even the storytellers don't dare to say this. Shut up. Don't ask if you don't know. We'll be relying on it to make a fortune next year. You don't know how poor I am right now. Do you think it's easy for me to raise 2,000 to 3,000 people on the mountain? Let's talk about this first. Don't tell anyone about this. This is a way for us to get rich in the future. Do you want to drink some cold beer? Chang Chumo nodded his head like a rattledrum. He looked at Zhang Feng as if he was looking at a god. Chang Chumo didn't want to continue talking about this matter. Hearing Zhang Feng's words, he kept his mouth shut. He always felt that it wouldn't be difficult for his brother to earn money. There was no need for him to make preparations now. After all, whether it was the white paper or the braised meat, etc., there was also the matter with those old bastards a few days ago. Those were all ways to make money. Moreover, those dozens of boxes of money were stored in ink. Even if it was the 2,000 to 3,000 yuan on the mountain, if they didn't do anything and just relied on the money to buy rice and food, they would still be able to live in luxury for 3 to 5 years. Why did this kid say that he was so poor? However, this wasn't the time to think about this. Being able to drink the iced grapes was the most important thing. Several people sat cross-legged around the vat. After waiting for the water in the basin to slowly freeze, Zhang Feng took out a small hammer and broke the white ice. Everyone couldn't wait to take the ice and bite it in their mouths. Then, they carefully took a few ice cubes and put them in their glass cups. Lying on the grass and drinking the refreshing iced grapes, they instantly felt very cool. The ice cubes hit the glass cups, making tinkling sounds. At this time, it sounded like a moving lullaby, making people feel refreshed from head to toe. No one was in the mood to talk. They just looked at the clouds floating in the sky, bumping into each other. From time to time, 1 or 2 little birds flew over their heads and played. Chun Chumo was a drunkard. He wasn't used to drinking small mouthfuls of wine. After drinking a bowl of wine, he got up and poured the ice cubes in the half-copper basin into the wine jar. Putting the wine jar beside him, Chun Chumo felt comfortable. He drank the wine and fell asleep for a while. Thunderous snoring sounded. Zhang Feng and others drank the wine in their bowls, looking at the sky and smiling bitterly. The weather in August was so strange and changeable. Sometimes, he was as gentle as a woman's hand gently stroking her cheek. Sometimes, he was as cruel as a strict father, cold and heartless. Sometimes, he was as passionate as fire. He just lay there and fell asleep. When Zhang Feng opened his eyes again, the sky was already full of stars. It looked like a jade belt across the sky. The vexed Zhang Feng found the 2 stars, Cowherd and Vega, in the sky. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. They would have a chance to meet each other once a year. As for him, he still had such a chance. The distance between him and his old mother at home was more than thousands of years. This was more than 1,000 years. Not to mention this life, even in the next life, he probably wouldn't be able to meet her again. Zhang Feng smacked his lips and picked up the remaining wine in the bowl. He seemed to be toasting to the Cowherd and Vega in the sky. He said softly, "Take care." Chapter 1143. After finishing his words, he drained his wine and tossed it far away into the darkness of Mount E. During this period of time, Zhang Feng did not feel a trace of danger approaching after agreeing to the clan's business. Every day, there would be a large number of people from aristocratic families coming to visit the mountain, and Zhang Feng did not reject them. Who didn't like money? Zhang Feng's generosity was also deeply liked by these aristocratic families. They had long known about Zhang Feng's character. They had investigated his character and found out that he was so generous to everyone. Therefore, they let go of the last trace of doubt in their hearts and wanted to pull Zhang Feng into their camp. Therefore, they were almost in a state of competition. The things that each family gave out were incomparable. From the beginning it was gold and silver, to the end it was rare treasures. Anyway, the rarer the better. No one knew where they got to know that Zhang Feng liked to collect those strange things. During this period of time, among the rare treasures that Zhang Feng received, those strange things accounted for more than half. For example, ivory carvings. Zhang Feng even found a few things like meteorites in this large pile of things. It seemed that Zhang Feng's plan had worked. However, Zhang Feng was not sure if these people were scheming against him. However, it didn't matter because the fish had taken the bait. Just as he was thinking about this, he heard Shiva's excited voice not far away. Dean, Dean. Shiva's voice brought Zhang Feng back to reality. Seeing Shiva, Zhang Feng hurriedly asked, Dean, what's wrong? What happened? The old village chief of Chang and University is here. Hearing this, Zhang Feng frowned slightly. Logically speaking, the old village chief would not come up the mountain. Could it be that something had happened? After kicking Chang Chumo and the others awake, he went to check on Niu Jianhu's injuries before hurrying back to the wooden hut with Shiva. Yes, the old scholar had been waiting for a long time. Upon seeing Zhang Feng, the old village head asked, Back when I was at Chang and University, I heard that you were in the military camp for old Niu's son. In the end, you even gave him the blood-seizing and soul-exchanging technique? Is there such a thing? Zhang Feng knew that the old village chief must have come for this matter. He nodded, then shook his head and said, That's a blood transfusion to set his bones. This is true. I'm preparing to help little Tiger with Dr. Sun the day after tomorrow. As for the blood transfusion, those are just rumors. You also know that there are some things that I'm too lazy to explain. Even if I explain, it won't make sense. He quietly looked into Zhang Feng's eyes. After a dozen breaths, seeing that Zhang Feng was not lying, he sighed and said, Okay. I just don't want to say anything more. It's fine as long as you know what you're doing. But let me give you a piece of advice. It's best if you don't touch it. If Sun Simiao can do it, then let him see it. After all, his reputation is out there. You should understand the principle behind it. If you kill your way out and claim this matter as your own, I can guarantee that you won't be able to stay in the academy in less than 10 days. Hearing this, Zhang Feng suddenly realized that he understood the old village chief and the old scholar's meaning. Then Zhang Feng helped him with some future arrangements and the old village chief's opinions. The two talked until late at night. Early the next morning, Zhang Feng personally sent the old scholar back to Chang'an. When he went to the tavern to deal with some matters, he suddenly bumped into the steward of the Zhang mansion when he went out. When the steward saw Zhang Feng, he thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. After taking a closer look, he shouted in surprise, Hey! When did you come down the mountain, young master? Zhang Feng was a little speechless, but he still made a fist and palm salute and said, Well, I had something to do, so I went down the mountain early this morning. I didn't know that you went so early. Where did you go? Seeing that Zhang Feng was so polite, the old steward smiled even more. His eyes narrowed into slits and he said, What can I do? A few rich young masters came to the basketball court over there and wanted to eat the snacks of our Yixing pastry shop, so I sent someone to the shop. But it was too early, so the shop didn't make the snacks. So the old master asked me to send them here quickly, so as not to lose our reputation. I just sent the snacks to them, but I didn't expect to meet you here. Miss misses you very much in the mansion. The steward insisted that Zhang Feng go to Fuli to have a seat, but Zhang Feng didn't want to go. At this time, he still had a lot of things to do, so he didn't have time to delay. However, after such a fuss, more people saw Zhang Feng. Helpless, Zhang Feng had to go to Fuli with the old steward. Zhang Feng hadn't been to Chang'an City for a long time. At this time, he was strolling in Chang'an City, looking at the garbage everywhere in Chang'an City and the dirty environment. Zhang Feng couldn't help but think of the magical country of India in the future. People in the future liked to describe the people of the Tang dynasty as dirty and stinky men. But in the face of such people, Zhang Feng could only laugh. It seemed that as long as the rich didn't bind their feet and didn't stick to one person until the end, it was a hurried thing. At least, at this time, although Zhang Feng saw a little dirty and messy, it was only a temporary solution. On normal days, there would still be some people coming to clean these things on the streets. But at this time, the morning market had just ended, and many vegetable farmers didn't even have time to take away the vegetables. So it looked a little dirty and messy. However, compared to the mystical country of India in the future, it was simply a heaven-like existence. At this time, Zhang Feng and the old steward were strolling in Chang'an City. From time to time, they could see a teenager jumping back and forth in a basketball court. They even saw a group of old ladies smiling from ear to ear on the basketball court, which made a group of old men scream. Chapter 1144. Zhang Feng really did not see what was so exciting about this. But perhaps these people had their own interests. Zhang Feng did not disturb them. The basketball court was built for these people to play. After a while, the two walked to the door of Niu Pai Huang's workshop with the billowing smoke. Zhang Feng frowned slightly. The old butler knew that Zhang Feng wanted to go in, so he did not say anything and stood aside to wait. Zhang Feng walked towards Niu Pai Huang's workshop. Logically speaking, the rented house should have been moved to the mountain at this time. Why were there still people cooking here? When Zhang Feng came closer, there were still many people, about 50 at this time. There was a long line here. Everyone stuck their heads out and waited for something. Niu Pai Huang's wife recognized Zhang Feng. She was also a snob. When she suddenly saw Zhang Feng in a sky-blue robe in the crowd, she thought that it was a handsome young master coming to greet him. She rubbed her eyes and found that it was Zhang Feng. She exclaimed, "Oh, I was wondering who it was." It turned out to be Prince Zhang. At this time, the people at this time did not think that it was Zhang Feng. But when they greeted the wife, they reacted and treated Zhang Hong as the master. Zhang Feng smiled bitterly, cupped his fist and apologized to the people. Then they entered the workshop. Niu Pai Huang heard the sound outside and ate a meal with the wife. Then he accompanied Zhang Feng into the workshop. After entering the bridal chamber, Zhang Feng asked, "Old Niu, what's the matter? Didn't I tell you to move to the mountain? Why is it still here?" Niu Pai Huang smiled bitterly and said, "I did want to move to the mountain, but at this time, last time, when I went to the mountain, the old village head told me to wait. He said that this thing was too scary and would disturb the name of the students on the mountain and ruin the reputation of the academy. So I heard that the workshop is being repaired in a valley downstream of the paper mill." Zhang Feng heard this and understood. It was indeed so. Originally, Shao Mountain was just a barren land. But because of this academy, this barren land gradually gained a way and an academy. Even now, it seemed to be more lively than Chang'an City. He could not help but think of a wonderful idea. Now the basic industries in Chang'an City were controlled by those big families. It was harder for ordinary people to buy real estate and land than to reach the sky. If his brain could develop Xuanshan and turn it into a residential area, that would be... Zhang Feng could not help but have his eyes turn into the shape of copper coins. In his mind, he instantly imagined rows of connected villas in the future. If it was built, as long as he, Zhang Feng, was willing, it could be said that in less than a month, there would be no empty space in the whole of Shao Mountain. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng could not help but feel excited. Young Master Zhang sat there alone, giggling and making greedy noises from time to time, which surprised Oxhide Huang and his wife. They mistakenly thought that Zhang Feng was angered by them. Oxhide Huang was so angry that he beat Zhang Feng fiercely. "Yes, it's all because of you, stinky woman. I've already said that we won't do anything here. We'll go to the mountain even if it's just a shack. It's all because of Mr. Zhang that we have today. It's all because of you, stinky mahjong. Stinky woman. Your hair is long but your knowledge is short. What do you think we should do?" Niu Pai Huang's wife had never seen such symptoms before. At this time, she was also stunned by the beating and could only hug her head and cry bitterly. Seeing this, Zhang Feng could only quickly mediate. "This has nothing to do with you. It's my fault. Let's put the matter on the mountain aside for now. Let's talk about the basketball business first. How's the basketball and football business recently? When it came to serious matters, Niu Pai Huang and his wife were simply like, they spoke excitedly as if they had opened up a chatterbox. Young Master Zhang, there's something you don't know. Last night, Lord Niu came to me personally and told me about this matter. In the past 2 months, those aristocratic families have been clamoring for it. The orders for basketball and football are terrifying. Yesterday and tomorrow there were already 1,000 orders for basketball and about 300 for football. And those people outside seem to have heard about the Imperial College and Hongwen Hall. I don't know why, but they personally went to Fuyang to place their orders this morning. After hearing about it, these people came over like crazy and queued up to buy the basketball. Zhang Feng could not help but feel a little more confident after hearing this. After that, Zhang Feng went to the county yamen again. Niu Weili had already sent the first 2 parties back to Zhang Feng's residence. After that, because he could not refuse Niu Weili's kindness, he could only have lunch at the cliff. Then, under Niu Weili's arrangements, he went to Zhang village. When Zhang Feng arrived at the Zhang residence, he learned that Zhang Yuyao and Zhang Sheng had already gone to his residence. He had no choice but to go in circles and rush back home. He was speechless. If he had known, he would have gone straight home. He would not have had to go in circles on Chang'an Street and be looked at like a monkey. Chapter 1145. The news of Zhang Feng's return spread quickly as if it had wings. When Zhang Feng returned to the gate, Jin Shu, Zhang Yuyao, and Zhang Shan were already waiting for him at the gate. Old Wei and Old Feng also crossed their arms and looked at him with a smile. Zhang Feng got down from the sedan and hurriedly cupped his hands. Old Wei, I didn't expect you to come too. Old Master Zhang, long time no see. You've been healthy recently. Then, Zhang Feng naturally took Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao's hands. Zhang Yuyao's cheeks turned red, but she still sweetly followed him in. He was addicted to holding hands. The first few times he held hands. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, Zhang Feng's list became bigger. As soon as he entered the gate, Zhang Feng was shocked by the scene in front of him. Inside and outside the gate, there were more than 30 burly men standing upright, holding short sticks. When they saw Zhang Feng, they shouted angrily in unison, "Old Master has returned." Those who didn't know would think that he had come to the Duke's public house. Seeing this, Zhang Feng hurriedly asked, "This is?" Zhang Shan looked at Zhang Feng suspiciously and said, "Aren't they the people you asked old you for? Do you still remember that group of veterans?" Only then did Zhang Feng remember this matter. He greeted them and entered the courtyard. The courtyard was very big. It was so big that Zhang Feng and the others had to walk around 7 or 8 corridors before they reached the living room. There were already maids in the living room who had prepared seasonal fruits and tea. After the guests and the host sat down, they asked almost in unison about what had happened during this time, such as the basketball. They also asked about the dozens of carriages of gold and silver and those rare treasures that had been transported last night. They all asked what Zhang Feng had done and why there were so many things suddenly. They also asked about the 2 guys from the Imperial College and the Hongwen Guan. They had heard that they had always been at odds with him. Why did it suddenly become like this these few days? Zhang Feng also patiently told them about the recent events. Only then did they realize what had happened. They praised Zhang Feng again and again, saying that he was good at doing business. Wei Zhang and Fang Xianling were even more amazed. They really wanted to ask Zhang Feng about the specifics of this matter, but Zhang Feng just said that he had discussed this matter with Lao Li and dismissed them. The 2 of them were not fools. Since the emperor knew about this matter, it meant that Zhang Feng was not willing to talk about it in detail. It meant that the emperor and Zhang Feng had made a plan. As for what the plan was, the 2 of them really did not know. For a moment, the 2 of them were lost in thought. Seeing this, Zhang Shan hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Men, bring the account book. Since the son-in-law is back, it's better to leave this matter to him." The old housekeeper happily entered the classroom and handed a thick account book to Zhang Feng. Zhang Shan patted the account book in his hand and said, "Feng Zi, the money recorded in this account book, as well as the paintings, porcelain, and so on, have been converted by Old Man for you. There are about 20,003 taels of gold, more than 1,000 taels of silver, and more than 50,000 strings of copper coins. As for the other things, I don't know what strange things they are. I have put them in the study for you to see later. Zhang Feng could not help but be stunned when he heard this. Where did so much come from? Without waiting for him to finish, Zhang Shan smiled and stroked his beard. This is all thanks to you. If it weren't for you, where would we get so much money from by handing over all the branches of Chang and Hotel to them? You let each of the Guanlong 8 great families buy the joining fee of 1,000 branches in one breath. These are only a part of it. There are also some, such as the Shangxi Wang clan, Longxi Li Shi, and others. Recently, they have also been negotiating with us. But we dare not agree. After all, I also know that you have conflicts with them. I was thinking of going up the mountain to talk to you, but I didn't expect that you would make this matter become like this. So, how do you think we should deal with this matter? Zhang Feng did not have any good ideas for a while, so Zhang Feng hurriedly said, I can't deal with this matter. You can leave it to Lao Li and Old Wei. After all, they are businessmen. They are very insightful in this regard. I am too busy these days. Wei Zhang and the others' eyelids twitched. This kid is really cunning. He wants to leave this matter to them? Obviously, he wants them to take the lead. Who in the imperial court didn't know that they did not get along with those involved? But at this time, they can't say it. After all, the emperor knows about this. Now that Zhang Feng said this, they have to go back and discuss with the emperor before making a decision. After a while, Wei Zhang waited for Zhang Feng to talk about the business before asking, Xiaohu's leg? Are you sure you have a way to cure it? Wei Zhang's eyes flashed with a trace of pleading. Although the poison blood life-changing method aroused his interest, he was more concerned about it. What he wanted was the bone-setting method. Chapter 1146. In the early years, it was a clan brother of Wei Zhang's. Because of the war, his legs were crippled. Until now, he had been bedridden. He had thought of many ways and even invited a miracle doctor to take a look. But all he could do was forcefully stuff the exposed bone fractures back into his body. But even so, he still felt unbearable pain all over his body when he moved. He used to be a man like an iron tower, but after a few years of suffering, he was as thin as a stick of firewood. Today, when he heard about this, Wei Zhang could not help but come forward to ask. When Zhang Feng saw this, although he was a little impatient, he still nodded and said sympathetically, As long as the bones are not broken, it should be fine. The day after tomorrow, I will prepare to set Xiaohu's bones. If you are interested, do you want to go up and take a look? Of course, he had to go and take a look. The two of them decided that 3 days later, they would witness Niu Xiaohu's miracle on the mountain. Then, Wei Zhang left in a hurry, ready to pass this good news back home and let his family be happy. After Wei Zhang and Fang Xianling left, there was nothing else to do. They simply chatted about the recent gossip and interesting things. The servants in the house had just brought the dishes to the table. In the courtyard, a servant rushed in. Zhang Shan was a little unhappy. He frowned slightly and said, Why are you panicking? The servant said in a panic, Old Master Zhang, it's not good. When Zhang Feng heard this, he could not help but frown. Before he could say anything, Zhang Shan's face darkened. Bastard! Tell me, what's not good? The servant looked at Zhang Feng and then looked at Zhang Shan. Then he said, There's an employer who wants to escape. When Zhang Shan heard this, his face turned cold. Bastard! I'm being kind to them. I've served them good food and drinks for so long, and they want to run away. Do they think this is a charity hall? Chase after him. I want to ask him what he's trying to do. The meal could no longer be eaten. The mansion was in a state of chaos, and some people even brought their dogs. Zhang Feng was looking forward to the two girls following Zhang Shan out of the living room. From afar, he could hear a burst of angry cursing coming from the back pavilion or the east hall. He went forward to take a look and saw a thin and weak body under a wintersweet tree in the east pavilion. He was being chased by people. Everyone picked up their weapons and pressed the person on the ground to beat him. The person was beaten until he screamed in pain and wailed loudly. Seeing this, Zhang Feng hurriedly stepped forward to dissuade them. Only then did they stop. Zhang Feng took a closer look. Although this person was covered in dirt and had unkempt hair and a dirty face, he looked to be about 14 or 15 years old, similar to the dog's age. He asked, "Yuyao, what's going on?" Zhang Yuyao briefly told Zhang Feng what had happened. After Zhang Feng moved into the villa more than 10 days ago, there seemed to be a lot of food left. Therefore, Zhang Shan decided to give the money to the refugees in Chang'an. However, in this way, the refugees were bound to stay at the gate of Zhang Mansion every day. Zhang Shan was quite helpless, but there were more and more refugees. Seeing that there would be more and more problems if this went on, Zhang Shan picked out some people he was quite satisfied with among these people and handed them to the steward of Zhang Feng's villa. It was a job for them so that they would not be freeloaders. However, after this matter was settled today, these people actually wanted to run away after lunch. How could Zhang Shan not be angry? Zhang Feng also had a rough idea of what he meant. He was also a little angry. This bastard, not only is he addicted to freeloading, but he has also become a dog skin plaster. Not only is he an idiot, he even steals the food of my Zhang family for half a month. If this spreads out, my reputation will be ruined. Zhang Feng patiently followed in front of that person and asked, "Why are you running away?" I want to go home." That person cried as he rubbed his swollen eyes with heart-rending pain. Zhang Feng asked again, "Why do you want to go home? You are here to work. You have to know where your duty lies." Hearing this, the young man immediately wailed and said, "My father wants to work in the field." Zhang Feng was speechless. Seeing that Zhang Feng did not speak, the young man wailed again. "My father wants to work in the field. If he doesn't work, he will starve to death. He won't be able to spend the new year this year." At this time, with the young man's crying and wailing, more and more people gathered. Even the servants in the house frequently looked at him. At this time, Zhang Feng was also close to this young man, and the sympathy in his heart gradually disappeared. If he appeared too weak, there was no way to deter these people. After all, this was a family, and at this time only Zhang Yuyao and the technical department were in the house. He was often not around. If these people thought that he was easy to talk to, wouldn't the price be chaotic in the future? Who could suppress them? Zhang Feng's face turned cold. He asked someone to bring a chair over and sat in front of the young man. He asked, "What does this have to do with your father?" "My father wants to wait for my clothes. He wants to work in the field." Zhang Feng was stunned when he heard this. The young man continued to cry and said, "If I don't go back, he won't have clothes to wear. If he can't work in the field, I will starve. When the sun is dry, I have to go back. Otherwise, he will whip me. Everyone in the family will starve. My brothers and sisters may not survive this year." Zhang Feng couldn't help but be moved when he heard this. He asked, "You and your father wear the same pants." Chapter 1147. Lowering his head, he saw that the young man was wearing a pair of extraordinarily large breeches. The young man sniffled. In his oily hand, there was actually a lump of dirty booger. He rubbed it against the large breeches with familiarity. Zhang Feng was so disgusted that he almost threw up his dinner from last night. He let out a long sigh and looked at the other people who had caught up. They were the newly recruited workers, and their situation did not seem to be much better than the young man's. Zhang Feng turned around and looked at Zhang Shan. "Pass down the order. Make a new set of clothes for every worker. Hurry." Zhang Shan hesitated for a moment, but swallowed the words he wanted to say and nodded. In his opinion, Zhang Feng was too benevolent, too benevolent. This was not a good thing for such a big family, but after all, this was Zhang Feng's own family matter. It was not good for him to interfere. It was also not good for him to say anything. At this moment, the young man heard that he had new clothes to wear. "I finally have my own clothes." In this era, he did not have any concept of new clothes. That thing seemed to only appear when his mother saw him getting married. To most people, clothes did not exist. He resisted the urge to make a sound. Zhang Feng could not bear to see such a poor person crying. He could not help but have the urge to curse. Zhang Feng turned around and walked away, hypnotizing himself as he walked. Lao Tzu was here to do business and earn money, not to do good deeds. After he finished speaking, he led the two girls away. The young man was stunned, lying on the ground like a dog. He only reacted when Zhang Feng was a distance away. Suddenly, tears burst out from his red and swollen eyes. Then, he quickly kowtowed and shouted, "Thank you for the clothes, thank you for the clothes. I will be a cow or a horse for the rest of my life." His head hit the cold rock on the ground. Red blood splattered, dyeing the sparkling marble red. Zhang Feng could vaguely hear the young man's words. His heart twitched, and he did not know what to say. After a long time, he whispered, "When will this group of people who want to cheat for food and drink disappear?" Although he was cursing, he did not know that a warm current had formed in the depths of his heart. Lao Tzu was going to fall. Zhang Feng returned to his residence and met up with Zhang Shan and the others. They chatted for a while, and there was even some unpleasantness because of this ordinary matter. According to Zhang Feng, he wanted Zhang Feng to find an old butler himself. Having an old man at home was like having a treasure. Zhang Feng recommended several candidates, but Zhang Shan rejected them all. Under Zhang San's inquiry, Zhang Feng said that he wanted to have the old village chief take over the house, but was strongly opposed by Zhang Shan. He was not related to them by blood. If such a huge family property was handed over to him, who would dare to be at ease? In the end, they were in a deadlock and the matter was left unsettled. Zhang Feng was too lazy to care about these trivial matters. After giving full authority to Zhang Shan, he left the mansion and walked up the mountain. This time, Zhang Feng bought some rare materials when he went down the mountain, especially those rare ores. At this time, he had to ask for them to prepare for the operation, such as the rubber infusion tube, the glass infusion bottle, and so on. These things were indispensable. It was impossible to use fish intestines and other things all the time, right? This thing was really too unsightly, and who knew how many germs it carried? The most important thing was still the needle. He found some strange things in the treasure room at home, and then walked around the streets. After that, Zhang Feng hired a carriage and quickly went up the mountain. At this time, the smelting factory had already entered into a regular operation. Basically, it could produce about 300 gene of steel every day. However, this was under the condition that there was not enough coal. If there was enough coal, it should not be a problem to produce 500 gene a day. By the time Zhang Feng arrived, the sky had already darkened. Everyone was extinguishing their fires and preparing to rest. Arjunan strolled leisurely to the entrance of the workshop. As he looked at the sky, he saw a lantern slowly approaching. Just as he was wondering who it was, Zhang Feng coughed. Arjunan was shocked and hurried to greet him. "Mr. Dean, why are you here at this time?" Zhang Feng did not say anything and asked, "Is Mokito in?" "Yes." "Well, ask him to come out. I have something to discuss with the two of you. Let's go to my cabin." While talking, Zhang Feng left with the lantern. When Zhang Feng returned to the cabin, before the lantern was lit, he heard a knock on the door. When he opened the door, he saw two dusty barbarians standing at the door. They were Arjunan and Mokito, who had just finished work. After witnessing Zhang Feng and Arjunan enter the cabin, Arjunan poured out some of the things he bought from the cowhide bag on the table and said, "I need something good now, but I don't know if the two of you can make it." When the two heard this, they were really not sure about this thing. They quickly asked, "Are you talking about the embroidery needle, or something else?" Zhang Feng nodded. "Yes, it is similar to the embroidery needle, but there must be a hole in the middle where water can drip out. Can you make it?" Chapter 1148. This time, the two of them were completely stumped. If it was a needle, anyone could make it. However, it required a hole in the middle, which was difficult. The needle was so thin, but if it was like this, Zhang Feng explained the infusion needle in detail. Only then did Mokito realize, if that's the case, this old servant is willing to give it a try. However, I might not be able to make it. Give me 2 days. Zhang Feng shook his head and extended a finger. 1 day? Only 1 day. Hearing this, the two of them could not help but change their expressions slightly. However, they still nodded heavily and left in a hurry. When they left, They took away the infusion needle that Zhang Feng had given her, as well as the syringe and the needle manufacturing blueprints. Then he said to Mokido, "I heard that you were a top glaze master in the Western region? An expert glaze master in the world?" Mokido repeatedly declined, not daring to call himself an expert. Zhang Feng smiled and said, "You are worthy of this title. Don't decline. I don't have so many rules here. If you can do it, you can. If you can't, you can't. This is what you have to do." Hearing this, Merkel was a little touched. However, she did not know what he wanted to do. She stood silently at the side, seemingly knowing what he was worried about. Seeing this, Zhang Feng said, "Actually, you don't have to worry so much. Here you are just like home. What are you worried about? Actually, I have something here. If you are willing, I can pass it to you now and let you go back to your old profession." Zhang Feng explained the concept of the infusion tube and the infusion bottle. When he went to Chewing Gum's place, Zhang Feng wanted to talk about this. However, although the two of them had been in contact with rubber for a while, if they wanted to make such a high-end product, Zhang Feng was probably thinking about it himself. That was why he asked Mokido. With Zhang Feng's detailed explanation, the glass bottle and the infusion set were easy to make. However, the main problem was the infusion tube made of rubber. He could not help but feel a little troubled. He knew about rubber because it was sometimes used when making glazes. However, at this time he had to make a plastic tube completely out of rubber. What was plastic? How could it be used to make a rubber tube? Zhang Feng saw that he couldn't explain, so he simply found a piece of rubber from the rare treasures that the 5 surnames and 7 hopes had given him this time. He then found a small copper bowl and placed it on top of the oil lamp to slowly boil it. A piece of rubber about the size of a fingernail was placed in the bowl of soup and let it boil. Mokido's eyes were fixed on the boiling process in the copper bowl. The process was very long. The two of them chatted about other things and Mokido's progress with the firearms. After about 2 hours, the piece of rubber that was originally the size of a fingernail had become as clear as water. Zhang Feng then stood up and took a medium-sized bamboo stick from the broom. He brought it to me and Chewing Gum and said, "Look carefully. This is the method to make this flexible tube." As he spoke, Zhang Feng used the mud to make a mold that looked like a brick. Then, he slowly pressed the bamboo stick in his hand down and made a mold. Then, he carefully poured the boiled rubber into the bowl. Halfway through, Zhang Feng hurriedly stopped and filled up the bamboo skewers in his hand. He pressed and rolled them in the gaps between the skewers. Then, he poured the real rubber on the bamboo skewers back into the bowl. He increased the flame of the oil lamp and continued to boil. After a while, Zhang Feng took out a sharp knife and cut the solidified rubber along the surface of the mold until it was flat. Then, he carefully took out the translucent thing that was stained with a lot of mud and put it aside. Then, he made another mold and used the same method to pour the other half in and cut it again. At this time, Zhang Feng said, "Look carefully. This is the most important part." While speaking, Zhang Feng used an even smaller bamboo stick to evenly spread the rubber in the bowl on the half of the mold. After he finished, Zhang Feng carefully connected the other half. Only then did Zhang Feng let out a deep sigh of relief. In fact, he didn't know how to make this thing. The key was that he didn't know how to teach, so he could only wait for the plastic pipe to solidify. After that, Zhang Feng cleaned the mud on it. After cleaning it, he left a transparent pipe that was the size of a chopstick. Zhang Feng sent the pipe to Mokido. Mokido was instantly shocked. He took the pipe with both hands. The pipe was very soft like a dried yongjing. It was quite elastic. When he looked at the end of the pipe, he saw that there was a pipe in the middle. It was the size of a small bamboo stick. Mokido couldn't help but ask, "Is this the pipe you were talking about?" Gao Feng nodded. "I want this kind of thing. Now you know what to do, right?" When Mokido saw this, he held the tube like it was a treasure and nodded heavily. "I understand." Then he hesitated for a moment. Then he took out a summary of the medical equipment and sent it to Mokido. "Keep this thing carefully. Don't spread it. This is my secret." Chapter 1149. Mokido was so emotional that he almost knelt down in front of Zhang Feng. He grabbed Zhang Feng with his trembling hand and choked with sobs for a long time. In the end, Zhang Feng smiled and patted him on the shoulder. If you want to thank me, get it out before tomorrow. The day after tomorrow, or better yet, at this time tomorrow night, I want it in my hands. Mokito wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and nodded heavily. Then he walked out of Zhang Feng's room. It was another sleepless night. For many people, it was an ordinary night. However, for many people, it was the beginning of a difficult month, especially on Shao Mountain. The people of White Deer College. Niu Jinhu's leg injury was imminent. Although the wound's infection had been temporarily suppressed, the result was still imminent. Many people, whether it was White Deer College or Chang'an City, had their eyes fixed on the mountain. They were all waiting for Zhang Feng to succeed. The lights in Zhang Feng's room were not turned off for the entire night. Only when the sound of running exercises could be heard did Zhang Feng slowly drag his tired body to a chair in front of the door and sit down. After washing his face with cold water, he hurriedly walked to Sun Simiao's bamboo house. Sun Simiao was brewing tea. When he saw Zhang Feng, he was not surprised. He poured a cup of tea for Zhang Feng and said, "I heard that you didn't sleep last night?" Zhang Feng nodded. "Yes." "Why?" "Because there is no time. Xiaohu's leg cannot be delayed any longer. Tomorrow is the last day, so—" Sun Simiao smiled. "So you want to let the old man do it now, right?" He nodded and said, "To be safe. I still want to test it to prevent any mistakes." "Old man, I've thought about it a long time ago. Even if you didn't mention it, I would have thought about it too. I'll look for you later. I heard that Lao Li and the others will come to the mountain to watch tomorrow." Zhang Feng didn't know who spread the news, but he still nodded in tacit agreement. Sun Simiao didn't say anything. He just looked at Zhang Feng and received it. "Last night, I heard from Old Fart that a lamb in the sheep pen on the mountain broke its leg when it climbed over the fence." Zhang Feng couldn't believe it. How could it be so coincidental? However, he still heard Sun Simiao say, "The sheep are already prepared next door. Let's go to Old Gao's place now. There are fewer people there and no one will disturb us. It should be a good place to go." Zhang Feng nodded. "Let's give it a try. But there's one thing, Elder Sunday." This time, without waiting for him to finish, Sun Simiao laughed and said, "I know what you want to say. I've discussed your matter with Mr. Bosher and the others. Isn't it because the situation is unclear at this time? Don't worry. When the time comes, I'll announce that these things were made by me. It won't cause you any trouble. What do you think?" Zhang Feng couldn't help but hesitate. He stared at Sun Simiao, who looked indifferent. "I didn't expect Elder Sun to do this. I'm afraid that it will affect Elder Sun's reputation. Why don't we think of other ways? A person values himself very much." Zhang Feng couldn't help but think of one thing. That was the profession of a doctor, especially doctors in ancient times. They all lived by reputation. If such a thing happened at this time, it was very likely that something unexpected would happen. Some people might not be able to practice medicine because of this. However, Sun Simiao laughed and said, "Kid, you're thinking too much. What do you think the old man relied on to become a student? He relied on the old man's magnanimity. If the old man felt that it was right, he would do it. The old man never cared about reputation. As long as it was useful, it was the right thing to do. So I'll give you a piece of advice. Sometimes reputation is a good thing, but sometimes it's a poison that harms people." Zhang Feng's expression changed. He hurriedly bowed and said, "I'll remember the Church of Grace." Sun Simiao nodded with satisfaction. After drinking a cup of tea with Zhang Feng, he said, Let's go see that lamb." At this time, the farm was very quiet. The infusion was basically done here on Monday. Zhang Tufu had already moved to the foot of the mountain. Only Gao De and Ma Zhou were left here. Although it was a little dirty, it was considered a quiet place in White Deer College. More than half of the pigs in the farm, as well as pigs, sheep, chickens, ducks, geese, and other animals had disappeared. Some were eaten by the people on the mountain, but more were sent to the tables of the people in Chang'an. As for the farm, at this time, there were only a few boars and sows that were deliberately left behind. There was also a group of piglets that were playing around, as well as a dozen groups of chickens, ducks, and geese that were leisurely strolling around. At this time, thinking about it again, it was simply a world of difference from a month ago. A month ago, this place was known as the first in the entire Chang'an city, and even the surrounding areas of Chang'an, but now this place seemed so empty. The wild grass frantically exuded its fragrance in the farm. Before it could sway in the wind, a little piglet's mouth sniffed it and then bit it off. Chapter 1150. He grew healthily and became the pig's delicacy. Then he grew with all his might, and the pig nibbled on him again. The cycle repeated itself. Elder Gao seemed to have known that Zhang Feng and Sun Simiao were coming. He was already waiting at the door. When he saw the two of them, Elder Gao cupped his fists and gestured for them to enter. The second floor is ready. The hot water and all other aspects are also prepared. We can begin now. Zhang Feng didn't say anything. He just followed Sun Simiao into the spacious room that used to belong to Butcher Zheng. It was now empty. A lamb was placed on the table in the middle of the room. It was tied up on the table, and its left front hoof drooped weakly on the edge of the table. When the lamb saw them enter, it looked at them in horror. Its mouth moved as if it was asking them what they were going to do. Zhang Feng patted the lamb's head and said, "Then when do we start?" "Now let's start now," Sun Simiao said as he organized his medicine box. There was no time now. The failure of the mule experiment last time left a huge psychological shadow on Sun Simiao. At this moment, Sun Simiao seemed to be afraid to face it. Seeing this, Zhang Feng didn't say anything. The two of them carefully cut open the lamb's skin. There weren't any clamps or the like at this time, so they could only let Ma Zhou hold the cut open skin. After all, it wasn't Ma Zhou's first time doing something like this. Although he was good at it, he still felt a little pale when he made such a big cut on a lamb's leg. Even so, he still wanted to see what Zhang Feng was going to do. He also wanted to see the miraculous result. After doing all this, Zhang Feng basically plucked all the hair off the lamb's leg. The skin below the thigh and the part above the hoof were all peeled off. Because it had been fed the anesthetic soup beforehand, the lamb looked at them in horror. Its head rubbed against Zhang Feng's hand from time to time as if it was asking, "What is this? What are you doing?" Zhang Feng didn't explain all this to the lamb. He didn't want to. In no time at all, he had separated all the muscles on the lamb's body according to the location of the fascia. The lamb's bones had been broken into two. One of the bones had already popped out, while the other was inserted into the bone marrow of the other broken bone. Zhang Feng looked at the wound. Although he felt a little disgusted, he endured it and cleaned the wound. Then, he put down the dagger and looked at Elder Sunday. "It's up to you now." Sun Simiao nodded. Although this was his first time personally handling a knife, he was only an assistant the last time he was in the military camp. Therefore, it was inevitable that he would be nervous for the first time. Fortunately, the lamb's leg was completely cut open. After the muscles that wrapped around the bone were all cut open, the broken bone was taken out and soaked in alcohol to disinfect it. Then, according to Zhang Feng's instructions, he slowly looked for the cracks of the broken bone and pieced it back together. After all this was done, they naturally stitched up the muscle and fixed it. Zhang Feng didn't have to worry about this. After all, Sun Simiao had done it before, so he was quite familiar with it. Although it seemed very simple, it still took a full 4 hours to complete. When the two of them stopped, they were sweating profusely. However, he realized that old Gao and Ma Zhou were staring blankly at the lamb leg that had recovered to its original state with pale faces. The leg of the lamb was restored, and even the outer fur was sewn back. However, the broken part of the leg was firmly fixed with pieces of bamboo. After doing all this, Sun Simiao pulled out the acupuncture needles from the lamb's body one by one. The lamb still didn't seem to feel anything. It shook its hooves and realized that they were touching its hooves. It panicked and used its nose to rub the bamboo on the latter. It even stuck out its tongue and sneezed a few times. Sun Simiao said, "Make it drink all the things we prepared. Let me know when the effect of the anesthetic is over." After finishing all this, the two of them dragged their tired bodies back to old Gao's bedroom. They drank a big jar of water before they recovered. The two of them couldn't help but smile at each other. They couldn't hide the excitement in their eyes. The lamb's experiment seemed to have succeeded. Once the effects of the anesthetics wore off, if the lamb was fine, then it would be truly alive. Chapter 11:51. I didn't expect you to be so talented in this field. Before he could finish speaking, Zhang Feng gave him a thumbs up. Sun Simiao smiled and said, in ancient times, Hua Tuo cut open the skull, and Qin Shi Huang repaired the brain. After that, Bian Ke scraped off the bones of Guan Gong to treat his wounds. Although these stories were passed down by word of mouth, and the old man had also cut open people's chests with a knife, this was the first time he had set a bone. Although he was a little unfamiliar with it, this was still the old man's first time. He had a different understanding of medicine, so he was still confident. Indeed, after coming into contact with Zhang Feng's magical medical skills, Sun Simiao had really yearned for it. However, after personally experiencing it, he felt as if he had opened a brand new door in the field of medicine. After that, Zhang Feng and Sun Simiao once again studied the entire operation in detail. They even repracticed the operation with Niu Jian Hu many times. After that, the two of them dragged their tired bodies back to their respective rooms. The moment Zhang Feng entered the room, he went to sleep. Everything was ready. He was just waiting for the night to go over and see how the lamb was recovering. If the lamb was alive, if it was alive, that meant that the success rate of Niu Jian Hu's operation was already 90%. If there was even the slightest problem with the lamb, this matter would be a little troublesome. After all, Zhang Feng did not specialize in medicine. He only knew some general knowledge about physiology. Besides, this matter really had something to do with him. He did not want old Yu and old Niu to be so sad. Speaking of which, this was also his mistake. Although his two old buddies wouldn't blame him, Zhang Feng still felt guilty in his heart. After scolding himself in his heart, Zhang Feng slowly fell asleep. He had not slept well for a few days. At this moment, under the exhaustion, he finally fell into a deep sleep. The Mid-Autumn Festival poetry meet was imminent. With the mess at home and the mess at the academy, Zhang Feng did not have time to prepare these things. He could only beg Li Changqian and the others to put in a little effort. After all, if they only trained one kind of street dance in 12 days, as long as they put in a little effort, there should not be any mistakes. After all, the poetry meet was mainly about poetry. Even if they made mistakes, he would be there to support them. Although it would not be perfect, it would not attract too much attention. What Zhang Feng wanted was not just a chance to become a great scholar, but more importantly, he wanted to make his name known to the world. When he woke up the next morning, the sky was still dark. Zhang Feng opened the window and allowed the cold breeze to caress his cheeks. He looked out the window at a few women from Tonghui Square carrying buckets of water, going back and forth between the cafeteria and the mountain gate. In the small wooden house's storeroom, there were faint sounds of people handing over the day's food. Everyone seemed to have been attracted by the sound of Zhang Feng opening the window. They instantly turned their heads and saw Zhang Feng get up. They all went up to greet him. There were even two bold women who joked and wanted to help him dress up. After all, Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu were gone. Zhang Feng had returned to his sloppy appearance. What time was it today? But this was the time when the three major departments of the Ministry of Works and Rights, as well as elders from all parties, gathered at White Deer College to witness Zhang Feng's opportunity. If he went like this, wouldn't he be embarrassing White Deer College? However, Zhang Feng waved his hands and declined. When the two women saw this, they had no choice but to find old He and his wife. Old He's wife didn't say anything and directly pressed Zhang Feng onto a stool. With old He's wife personally handling the scythe, he finally calmed down. However, when he saw the scythe in old He's hand, he couldn't help but feel scared. He asked, "Old He, what are you doing with the scythe?" Old Ho pointed at Zhang Feng's chin and the black hair between his lips and said, "I'm shaving your beard. A man's beard needs to be trimmed to be better and thicker. Don't you know this?" Zhang Feng was so scared that his whole body trembled. He was about to go on strike. Okay, I won't shave. I'll do it myself when the time comes. Okay? I won't shave today. I think it looks good like this. This is called personality. After Zhang Feng repeatedly begged for mercy, he reluctantly put down the scythe. When he left the room, Steamed Bun had returned to the mountain. She squatted at the door with Guzi and Juzi, staring at Zhang Feng. Seeing Zhang Feng come out, Steamed Bun grabbed Zhang Feng's hand and refused to let go. Zhang Feng had no choice but to hug and touch her. Who wouldn't like such a cute little girl? The most leisurely person on the mountain now should be this little girl, right? Zhang Feng took Steamed Bun around the mountain and came to the cafeteria. He chose a few snacks and side dishes that Momo liked to eat. It was not easy to make the little girl happy. However, he waited for Steamed Bun to finish her meal before he hurriedly took Steamed Bun away. This time, Chang Chumo's people didn't come for breakfast. It was said that they went to the mountain to run before dawn. It seemed that they also knew that Zhang Feng had been troubled recently, so they didn't dare to bother him. They were practicing the so-called street dance desperately. They didn't let anyone see it and beat up anyone who saw it. Zhang Feng was speechless. He touched his chin and looked at Guzi and Juzi, who were eating the food on the second floor. He laughed and scolded. "Did I cheat you on the mountain? Can't you eat more gently?" The two laughed, but they still wolfed down the food. "So delicious. Brother Feng, why is the food on the second floor different from the food on the first floor?" Zhang Feng smiled and didn't say anything. After a while, he asked, "Do you want to eat the food on the second floor?" How could the two kids not want to? Their heads nodded like rattles. Seeing this, Zhang Hong laughed and said, "Then I'll give you a task. As long as you can familiarize yourself with the disciple rules at the end of this year, I'll make an exception and accept you as my last disciple. From now on, you'll eat whatever I eat." Chapter 1152. The two naturally didn't know what the disciple rules were. Not to mention these, they didn't even know how to read. Zhang Feng's promise to them was just a joke, but it also gave them a reason to keep up with the others, a goal to stand out. After accompanying the two of them to eat, when they walked out of the cafeteria, they saw Ma Zhou anxiously walking back and forth at the entrance of the cafeteria. He was holding a steamed bun made of brown rice in his hand and eating it with relish. Zhang Feng looked at the cafeteria in surprise and said, "Did you not release the tickets or something? Why are there so many delicacies? Why are you eating this thing?" Ma Zhou smiled awkwardly. "I'm used to it, I still have to save money. Buying books is more important." Zhang Feng was a little speechless. He was too lazy to argue with him. He asked, "Why are you waiting here so early? Tell me." Hearing this, Ma Zhou's face flashed with excitement and said, "I want you to see something good. Now that Dr. Sun has gone, you are the only one left." After hearing this, Zhang Hong realized that he should be treating the lamb. Then she hurried back to the farm with Chairman Ma. In the yard of the farm, the expert and Dr. Sun were squatting in the yard and staring at a little lamb. One of the little lamb's legs was tied with a bamboo splint. However, it was limping and bleeding happily on the grass. While eating grass, from time to time, it would use its mouth to nudge the hooves tied with the bamboo splint and bleat twice. It seemed to bleat twice as if it was complaining to everyone, wanting them to take down the ugly thing. Seeing this, Zhang Feng couldn't help but be overjoyed. He asked, "Elder Gao, is this the lamb from yesterday?" Sun Simiao laughed and stroked his beard. "What do you think?" Several people couldn't help but laugh heartily. After laughing, Sun Simiao patted the medical kit next to him and said, "This operation is no small matter. Wait, I heard that it should be at 12:45. They will all come to watch. Where are you going to do the operation?" When Zhang Feng heard this, he couldn't help but have a dignified expression. If so many people came to see it, logically speaking, it should be placed in an open area outside. However, there were too many bacteria outside, and it wasn't easy to do this. After thinking for a while, Zhang Feng suddenly slapped his head and said, "I'm going to put it in the teaching building." "Can't the teaching building do that?" "No, that's a place where we read the books of the sages. If we see something like that, we'll see blood. Moreover, the mountain gate hasn't even opened yet. It's very inauspicious." Zhang Feng waved his hand. "What's wrong with that? Didn't the academy set up military science and medical science for the first time? Let's treat this as a medical lesson for the entire academy. What do you think? Sun Simiao still strongly objected, but at this time the expert praised, Prince Zhang's method is very good. I think it's feasible. Old Sun, don't be entangled in these cliches. Which rule in the academy do you think is strictly adhered to? While speaking, the expert pointed at the lamb's leg. Sun Simiao was stunned, and then he heaved a heavy sigh of relief. That's right, if I pay too much attention to these things, then I'd rather not do it. In that case, he might as well not do it. Everything that Zhang Feng was doing now was so shocking. If he had to take this into consideration, then what was the point of doing it? Fine, fine. Since it's like this, then I'll do as Fengzi said. Today, the sky was still beautiful. In the boundless blue sky, there wasn't even a trace of cloud to be found. Before dawn, carriages appeared at the mountain gate one after another. At first, the old village head at the gate personally welcomed them. But as more and more people came, the old village head became numb. He just nodded and clasped his hands to the people who came. Then he found a student and introduced the academy to them while leading them into the already prepared classroom. Naturally, the old village head didn't need to introduce people he was familiar with. He didn't have so much free time. The classroom was painted snow white, and at this moment, one could still vaguely smell the smell of lime. However, such a bright classroom made everyone abnormally excited, and it added a sense of solemnity to the atmosphere. The tables and chairs in the classroom designated by Zhang Feng were all moved away, leaving only the operating table in the middle prepared by Zhang Feng. A thick white blanket was spread on the operating table, and a sterilized white wool skin was placed on top of it to prevent the blood from flowing. In the classroom, there was a smell of mugwort smoked and baked. Even the ground was sprinkled with a thick layer of quicklime to disinfect. At this time, the smell of lime had already covered the smell of mugwort. Originally, the windows of the academy's teachers were made according to the glass windows in the back room. However, there was no time to make transparent glass, so at this time, although there were iron rods and other things, they were all white pieces of paper. This was also the detestable part of the academy. It was good to have white paper, but at this time, the window paper had already been poked with holes of various sizes. Chapter 1153. A group of people blocked the classroom door, as well as the window, staring. They looked at Niu Jianhu, who was lying on a bed, blinking, discussing something. When had Niu Jianhu ever seen such a scene? These people here were all big shots. Moreover, they had come especially for him. As he lay on the bed and greeted everyone with a smile, he urged Zhang Feng to hurry up. Zhang Feng was so angry that he threatened him that if he dared to move again, his legs might not be guaranteed. Only then did Niu Jianhu hurriedly shut his mouth. Li Shimin did not come, but Li Yuan came late, with his hands behind his back, ignoring everyone's dissuasion. He walked straight into the classroom and sat next to Niu Jianhu. Soon after, a servant set up a small table next to him and put some incense on it. There was even a small tea stove. Zhang Feng glared at Li Yuan and had an impulse to kill someone. But the more Li Yuan ignored him, the more he sat down to boil tea and drink. Seeing this, Zhang Feng could only sigh and no longer care about him. He did not see him at that time. After everyone had arrived, Zhang Feng and Sun Simiao looked at each other, nodded and said, "Then let's start. Wait for Feng Zi." At this time, Niu Jianhu was anxious and said, "My father doesn't seem to have come." Just as Zhang Feng was about to make a move, Lu Jianhu did not find him in the crowd. Although Niu Jianhu was not afraid of death, he also hoped that his father was by his side. Zhang Feng looked out the window after hearing this, but he really did not see him. He looked at Yu Qigong outside the door and said, "Pervert old you, why didn't old Niu come?" Yu Qigong looked to the side. Speechless, he said, "What, you still want me to invite you?" Hearing this, Zhang Feng knew that Niu Jinda had come long ago, but he did not want to see Niu Jianhu's current state. He heard that his father came. Only then did Niu Jianhu lie down in satisfaction. He put on a generous appearance and said, "Come." Seeing this, Sun Simiao passed a bowl of numbing soup and sleeping pills to Niu Jianhu after getting Zhang Feng's permission. Seeing this, Niu Jianhu gulped it down without hesitation and even waved his hand at the door. Seeing this, Sun Simiao said, "Fangzi, should we make some preparations?" Sun Simiao was the one who had stage fright. Zhang Feng waved his hand and looked at Yu Qigong. "Old Yu, I remember that there were still 2 Turks left after the blood transfusion. Where are they?" Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard this. Was this kid really going to use the blood exchange life-prolonging technique? Everyone could not help but stare unblinkingly at Zhang Feng. Yu Qigong said, "Wait a moment. That's good. Look at me. I can't believe I forgot something so important." He didn't forget about it. In fact, he had already prepared it. He just wanted to see if this kid really needed it. Yu Qigong hurriedly waved his hand. A person who had been washed clean and tied up like a dumpling was carried into the classroom by 2 strong men. As soon as he entered the classroom, the Turk had already been washed clean. Zhang Feng could even faintly smell the scent of alcohol on him. It seemed like they had learned from Zhang Feng and forced him to drink. However, that kind of alcohol was useless. It could only make the blood more active, which was not beneficial to Niu Jianhu at all. However, Zhang Feng could not say it out loud. He cupped his fists at everyone and said, "For White Deer College, the first medical class of the year officially begins." At this moment, 2 voices sounded from outside the door. "Brother Zhang Feng, please wait a moment. Can we come in and take a look?" The person who spoke was Ouyang Kai. He was standing at the back of the crowd. Seeing Ouyang Kai and the others wave their hands, Zhang Feng was a little hesitant. However, looking at Li Yuan's arrogant appearance, he finally clenched his teeth and said, Come in. As long as you guys can take it, what's the harm in coming in? The premise is that you guys can take it. Don't make a sound." The 2 of them were very excited. They hurriedly swore before hurriedly entering the classroom. Seeing this, He Zhongjing and Old Chen wanted to enter as well. However, the moment the 3 of them reached the door, they hurriedly shrank back when they saw Li Yuan. Ouyang Kai, Yu, and Lu Hongwen also knew Li Yuan. However, they were here on behalf of the Academy for the academic exchange. They had already reached a consensus with Zhang Feng regarding this matter. The 3 academies had formed an alliance, so it was still acceptable. They just pretended not to know and pretended to be calm. However, Li Yuan did not even look at the 2 of them. This made them feel a little embarrassed. After all, why would a person of his level care about a few small shrimps? After everything was prepared, Zhang Feng saw the effects of the Mephisan slowly appear. Niu Jianhu also felt a little sleepy. At this moment, Zhang Feng used his finger to poke Niu Jianhu's leg and asked, "Little Hu, do you feel it?" Hearing this, the sleepy Niu Jianhu shook his head dully. In the end, he fell into a deep sleep. Only at this moment did Zhang Feng let out a sigh of relief and said, "Let's begin." Following Zhang Feng's call to begin, everyone did not dare to breathe loudly. They stared at Zhang Feng with their eyes wide open. That Li Yuan even put down the tea that he had picked up. With his hands behind his back, he stood up and looked at the dagger in Zhang Feng and Sun Simiao's hands. As for Ouyang Kai, Yu, and Lu Hongwen, the 2 of them stared at Zhang Feng with a face full of curiosity. They wanted to see how exactly he would start this so-called bone setting. Zhang Feng fixed the Turk, who had been drunk in advance, on a shelf at the side. Then, he washed the transparent glass flat and the pages of the book that he had rushed to make overnight with alcohol. Only then did he nod at Sun Simiao. Seeing this, Sun Simiao used alcohol to gently wipe the Turk's carotid artery. Then he wiped Niu Jianhu's arm. After that, Zhang Feng used a rubber bandage to tie Niu Jianhu's arm, making his blood vessels protrude. Then, he used a needle to gently prick the Turk's neck. With this prick, the blackened blood instantly flowed along the rubber tube and into the glass bottle. Seeing what was inside, everyone could not help but be shocked. Was this that kind of blood exchange technique? Chapter 1154. After everything was done, the blood slowly filled up about half of the infusion bottle. Zhang Feng then slowly inserted the needle on the other side into Niu Jianhu's arm. After a cycle was formed, and Niu Jianhu did not have any abnormalities. Only then did Sun Simiao examine Niu Jianhu in detail. He slowly inserted the 99 silver needles into his various acupoints. After that, Zhang Feng covered Niu Jinhu's body with a piece of white cloth. Only his face and injured leg were exposed. At this moment, everyone's heart skipped a beat. Yu Qigong's expression changed slightly. He looked at Niu Jinda, then at Niu Jinhu, and then at Zhang Feng. He saw a flash of disappointment in Zhang Feng's eyes, and he couldn't help but frown. Logically speaking, this white thing filled with bad luck was meant for people who had passed away, right? Why did this kid give it to Niu Jinhu? Could it be that he had no other choice? Was he just doing his best? At this moment, almost everyone present had such thoughts. Even Li Yuan frowned slightly. He coughed softly and hurriedly reminded Zhang Feng. Fengzi, isn't the white cloth a little inappropriate? What's wrong with it? However, as soon as the words left his mouth, Zhang Feng instantly remembered that this was the Tang dynasty. Moreover, the people were quite wary of these things. 100 steps could not be used by living people, except for mourning. The expressions of Zhang Feng and the others were very strange. Yu Qigong's expression was also a little pale. Zhang Feng hurriedly explained, "Everyone, don't misunderstand. The reason why this cloth is used is because this is a pure-colored cloth that has just been woven. This is medical knowledge. There are irritating ingredients on the cloth that has been dyed. If it covers the body, it will be thick and troublesome. However, this batch of cloth has been boiled in boiling water and then repeatedly detoxified, so there's no other meaning. Everyone, don't worry. It's just for the sake of a more perfect success in this operation." Hearing this, everyone's expressions became slightly better. Zhang Feng heaved a deep sigh of relief. He was very worried that if word of this got out, if he was careless and did not explain, if the surgery failed, how would he face old Niu? In this era, only wearing white things on one's body was tantamount to something inauspicious. Zhang Feng really didn't think of this point. Although this matter had been explained, he was still somewhat skeptical. However, Zhang Feng did not have the time to explain. After all, time was of the essence. If he delayed any longer, the weather at night would be fine, but during the day, the temperature at noon would be too high. The possibility of bacterial infection was very high. After washing his hands, he and Sun Simiao did not hesitate to gently cut open the skin and flesh above Niu Jinhu's calf bones. As soon as the two sabers slashed down, it instantly caused a wave of exclamations. Although Li Yuan was used to this kind of bloody scene, it was really the first time he saw a knife on a living person at this time. His face couldn't help but become somewhat pale at this time. Everyone's hearts were in turmoil. Ouyang Kai's entire body was trembling. This was really the first time he saw a living person cutting open the skin and flesh on the leg. That visual impact, it was simply too good. At this time, Sun Simiao was also not feeling well. He had practiced 2 or 3 times. If he were to do it now, due to the success of the lamb last time, Sun Simiao's mood was greatly relieved. He no longer had the previous worries. Although the saber in his hand was still trembling, the action of cutting open the skin and flesh still leaked out a little. After all, this was doing something on a living person. He did not dare to guarantee that nothing would happen. Now, Niu Jinhu's leg bones had been exposed for 3 days. At this time, the cells at the front of the bone were slightly dry, and the bone stubble was a little black. Zhang Feng took out the 3-edged bayonet that he had prepared in advance and used it as a brush. He rubbed away the broken parts at the front of the bone, trimmed it slightly, and cleaned the stains and coagulated blood on it. This work was very meticulous. Zhang Feng could only do it himself. When the people present heard the sound of the file, they could not help but feel their hearts churn. Even their legs were trembling. After another hour, Zhang Feng finally finished everything. He looked at Sun Simiao and said, "Elder son, wait for me to count to 3. When I count to 1, let's use our strength together and reset his leg bones. What do you think?" Sun Simiao did not have time to answer at this time. He only nodded heavily. At this time, outside the door and inside the door, the 3 people stood on their tiptoes and stuck their heads out to see how they were going to reset the leg bones. At this time, Zhang Feng was holding Niu Jinhu's leg. His heart was beating faster. After he was ready, he looked at Sun Simiao. who was holding Niu Jianhu's leg, and said slowly, 3, 2, 1, pull. As Zhang Feng's voice fell, the two of them used their strength at the same time. Then they slowly stretched Niu Jianhu's right leg in the opposite direction. Even though Niu Jianhu had taken anesthetics and sleeping pills, he still screamed in pain due to the intense pain. Ah! But before he finished screaming, Niu Jianhu fainted from the pain again. Chapter 1155. Zhang Feng could not care about anything else. Although the leg bone had returned to its original position, it did not mean that the matter was over. He hurriedly knelt on the ground and stared at Niu Jianhu's leg bone. After hesitating for a while, the leg that did not have much blood to begin with gushed out blood again. It was like a blowout. Zhang Feng did not care about anything else. His eyes were fixed on the bone stubble, looking for every broken crack. At this moment, everyone's hearts were in their throats. No one knew what Zhang Feng was doing. After about the time it took to eat a meal, Zhang Feng finally set the bone. However, at this moment, he looked as if he had been fished out of the water. After that, Zhang Feng took out the remaining penicillin that he had prepared beforehand and disinfected the bone. After disinfecting the bone, he quickly stitched up the fascia and muscles. Then he cleaned up the last layer of skin and flesh. However, the blood was still gushing out crazily as if a gate had been opened. Sun Simiao hurriedly pierced another silver needle at the base of Niu Jianhu's thigh. Only then did the bleeding slow down. However, Niu Jianhu's face gradually turned pale. Although he had been receiving a continuous blood transfusion, the blood flow was too fast and the body could not bear it. Zhang Feng hurriedly urged, "Elder son, quickly suture. You go up and I'll go down." Sun Simiao checked Niu Jianhu's pulse and so on. Zhang Feng checked the eyelids and pupils. After that, the two of them hurriedly began to suture. However, the trickling blood instantly fermented in the lime powder in the classroom under the high temperature. The smell became strange. It was pungent and had a hint of spiciness. Everyone could not help but become more worried. This kid, could it be that he could not pull through? Quick, cotton ball. Elder son, quickly suture. Prepare the sore medicine to prevent massive bleeding. Zhang Feng looked at the blood that kept gushing out as he sutured. He was also a little panicked. In the future, there were too many of such things. Postoperative hemorrhage was a common occurrence. However, this time it happened right in front of Zhang Feng's eyes, and he was the chief surgeon. Only then did Zhang Feng personally understand how difficult it was for a doctor to face such a situation. After that, Zhang Feng picked up some bandages that he had prepared in advance to stop the bleeding. He sewed up Niu Jianhu's wound while disinfecting it. In the end, Zhang Feng clenched his teeth and poured all the penicillin he had made himself onto the wound. Just like that, after the time it took to brew a cup of tea and a meal, Sun Simiao inserted the final needle. The surgery was finally a success. The two of them didn't dare to be careless. After all, Niu Jianhu's right leg was still bleeding. If it weren't for the free blood transfusion, Niu Jianhu would probably be. Sun Simiao checked Niu Jianhu's pulse and nodded. Then, together with Zhang Feng, they wrapped the bandage in their hands tightly around the wound. Basically, after wrapping a layer of gauze, they had to put a thick layer of medicine on the wound until the entire right leg was tightly wrapped. Only then did the two of them hurriedly put the bamboo splint that they had prepared in advance on Niu Jianhu. Until now, only then did Zhang Feng and Sun Simiao start to pant heavily. Zhang Feng glanced at the Turk. They didn't know when the Turk had completed his mission. The blood flowing out of his veins was also intermittent. Seeing this, Sun Simiao looked at Niu Jianhu's leg again. Only then did he hurriedly insert needles on his leg and chest again. Zhang Feng's eyes were also fixed on Niu Jianhu's leg that was constantly bleeding. Gradually, the bleeding stopped again. Seeing this, Sun Simiao pulled off the infusion tube on Niu Jianhu's body. After doing all this, the two of them basically sat down on the ground at the same time. Zhang Feng and Sun Simiao looked at each other, then hooked their fingers at Li Yuan. They pointed at the cigarette in his hand. Li Yuan rolled his eyes. He fumbled around in his arms and took out a pure gold cigarette box. He took out 2 cigarettes and handed them to the two of them. He asked, "This Is it? This kid is fine? Zhang Feng didn't say anything. After taking a few deep puffs of the cigarette, he stood up and glanced at Niu Jianhu. He then said, "Everyone, Brother Xiaohu's leg is saved. If there are no accidents, he will be able to walk on crutches in 2 months. In half a year, he will be able to walk on the ground." Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but heave a deep sigh of relief. Even Yu Qigong was so excited that he shouted, "Beautiful! I knew you could do it. Old Niu, listen. King, listen, your Xiaohu is fine." Niu Jinda had been listening carefully to all the sounds in the classroom, but he didn't dare to look. At this time, when he heard Zhang Feng and Yu Qigong's words, his tense body trembled slightly. Yu Qigong put his arm around Niu Jinda's shoulder and laughed. "Old man, did you hear what Feng said? Your kid is fine. In half a year, your kid will be able to jump around again. Did you hear that?" Ha 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 ha. He heard it. Niu Jinda heard everything. Although he didn't dare to make a sound or look, it was his son lying inside after all. He was more concerned about his son's safety than anyone else. After all, his Niu family only had this one seedling. At this time, when he heard Yu Qigong's words, Niu Jinda grinned. He seemed to want to enter Zhang Feng, but for some reason, his vision turned black and he slowly fell down again. Chapter 1156. At this time, everyone present began to think about what to do next. Although they had seen bone resetting, it was only a minor injury. Before coming, everyone had heard about this matter, but in everyone's opinion, this seemed to be a false rumor. After all, who could have a way to make such a serious broken bone on the street? Moreover, this bone stubble was exposed. Although before, there were indeed people who had heard about leg resetting and bone resetting, but the bones were not exposed and there were no red wounds. Brother Yong used a bamboo clip to pick him up, and after lying in bed for a year and a half, he could still walk with a limp, but this leg, it was basically a cripple. If he wanted to recover, it could only depend on whether he was sincere to God or not. But now, they heard that someone could use the blood of the Turks to exchange blood for blood and save a person who was already judged to be dead by the King of Hell. How could this not be miraculous? The most miraculous thing was that this person could actually put the leg bone that had been broken for at least 3 days on the street. Even if it was a piece of bone from a cow or sheep, if it was left outside for 3 days, it would have smelled so bad that it couldn't be smelled. How could it be reconnected? If this was not a miracle, then what was it? The most important thing was that the person really came back to life. Although he hadn't woken up yet because of the anesthetic soup and sleeping pills, everything seemed to be getting better after Dr. Sun's diagnosis. This was no longer a problem. The most important thing was that at this time, Sun Simiao didn't say anything. What qualifications did they have to speak? After Dr. Sun's 2 hours of observation and treatment, Sun Simiao finally breathed a sigh of relief. "It's done. Quickly carry him to the old man's bamboo house. Within these 10 days, the old man will take care of him personally. No one is allowed to disturb him." It's done. It's really done. This is really a miracle. At this time, everyone's mind couldn't help but become lively. The most important thing was that once this thing was done, it meant that in the future the broken leg would be as good as new. "Kid, are you sure it's really done?" Of course, Li Yuan was the first to be in disbelief. He waited for Zhang Feng to catch his breath before asking. Li Yuan was not the only one who had this question. Everyone present had it. Those who were able to come here today were definitely overlords of a region. Zhang Feng also understood the importance of Li Yuan's question. He nodded heavily and said, "It is indeed done." As he spoke, Zhang Feng swept his gaze around the room, before loudly announcing, "Allow me to keep you in suspense. Today's lesson is a medical lesson of our White Deer Institute. Actually, it's quite simple. Actually, you just have to deal with the patient's wound infection and disinfect it with this alcohol that I specially made. Pay attention to your physical hygiene." Zhang Feng explained in detail the physiology and hygiene, as well as those bacterial infections and so on. Otherwise, based on these people's thoughts of Brother Feng not regretting it until he hollowed out the city walls, he could forget about living a good life from now on. After he finished talking about this, Zhang Feng said while panting, Actually, this blood transfusion is not the kind of blood for life technique that you all understand. For example, if the water in a ditch dries up, the land in the field will also dry up. At this time, isn't the best method for us to carry water for irrigation? Similarly, at the end of the day, what little tiger lacks the most is blood. Once the body loses serious blood, if blood is not transfused, even if a deity comes, it will be impossible to save the situation. But this blood can't be used just any blood, Zhang Feng hurriedly added. Otherwise, if this group of old fellows really went back and got someone to draw blood from, wouldn't that be a huge sin? Zhang Feng hurriedly said, people who need blood transfusions are usually in a situation like little tigers, or those who have suffered serious external injuries and lost too much blood. Also, there are those who have been poisoned by poisonous snakes and need blood transfusions. In this kind of situation, you only need to find a serum and use this set of medical tools that I use. After receiving reasonable training, you can use it. Under normal circumstances, the amount of blood in a person's body is only enough to fill a basin. Hearing this, Li Yuan pointed at the Turkic man on the shelf who had long lost his vital signs and said, "Then what happened to him? Didn't we just draw all his blood? If this isn't blood for life, then what is?" Zhang Feng felt a headache coming on. This is a little special. Let's put it this way. Actually, in total, we drew less than 3 bowls of blood from him. It's just that this guy was scared to death. After all, anyone who doesn't know about this situation will have such a situation. So we still have to be careful when drawing blood. Also, if the blood type doesn't match, it can also kill people. So the best way is to use the blood drip method to identify relatives. However, this method is not strict. It can only measure whether the blood type of 2 people matches. It has nothing to do with a paternity test. The blood identification method that you all talked about, in my opinion, is all nonsense. You must not take it seriously. If you don't believe me, you also saw that little tiger has nothing to do with this Turkic man. So, we have to be careful.